Tonight, as you lie down and the room finally gets quiet, I want to offer you something that almost nobody talks about honestly. Peace that doesn't depend on believing the right thing. Not another rule, not another spiritual trend, not another productivity hack disguised as meditation. Just a simple, strange doorway called Zen. A religion of no religion that invites you to doubt everything, even itself, while you drift into the deepest sleep you've had in a long time. Maybe you've noticed this. The more content you consume about spirituality, mindset, and high vibration, the more pressure you feel to fix yourself. It's as if peace became another item on a to-do list you're already too tired to finish. You listen to guided audios that promise instant transformation, yet at night, your mind still replays the same worries, the same arguments, the same "what if I never change?" Zen starts in a different place. It whispers, what if there is nothing wrong with you to begin with? And the problem is just how noisy the room has become inside your head. That sounds almost offensive, right? If there's nothing wrong with me, why do I feel so anxious, so restless, so spiritually exhausted? Zen doesn't deny your pain. It doesn't ask you to pretend you're fine. It just says, the deepest part of you has never been broken, only covered. Like a clear lake with waves on the surface, you've mistaken the storm for the water itself. Tonight, as your body unwinds, we're going to stop fighting the waves and start discovering the lake. You're not here by accident. Something in you is tired of religious arguments and tired of empty atheism too. You've seen people use God as a weapon. You've seen others use science as a shield to avoid feeling. You may have walked through churches, temples, videos, and books, and still thought, okay, but how do I find peace when I'm alone in the dark with my thoughts? This is where Buddhism, and especially Zen, becomes strangely practical. It doesn't ask you to pick a side. It asks you to test reality in your own experience, breath by breath. In the next few minutes, you won't be asked to memorize doctrines, repeat mantras you don't understand, or force your mind to be empty. Instead, you'll hear stories, images, and examples that quietly reflect your own life back to you. The way you chase approval, the way you fear loss, the way you rush through your days and then wonder why nights feel so noisy. As you listen, something very simple will happen. Your body will relax, and your understanding will deepen at the same gentle pace. There's a paradox here that I want you to feel, not just understand. The more you stop trying to be spiritual, the more spiritual your ordinary life becomes. The more you stop trying to control your thoughts, the more your mind begins to settle on its own. The more you stop begging the universe for a different reality, the more power you discover to meet this reality with dignity and clarity. Tonight's journey is about that paradox. Doing less to finally experience more. You'll hear about a prince who walked away from a perfect life because he saw that no one escapes suffering. You'll hear about hungry ghosts that look suspiciously like our modern consumer lives, about monks who answer deep questions with jokes about the weather, and about people facing death with a calm that doesn't come from theories, but from direct insight. These aren't distant legends. They're mirrors for your anxieties, your habits, and the secret strength you don't always remember you have. And here's the fast reward I can promise, without lying to you. Even if you forget every concept after this video ends, your nervous system will remember that at least once, you allowed yourself to rest in a different way. Not numbing out with scrolling, not escaping into fantasy, but resting by becoming more present and less afraid of what's inside you. That felt sense of, I can stay with myself without running away, is worth more than any clever quote. So as you settle your head on the pillow, you don't have to do anything right. You don't have to breathe perfectly. You don't even have to stay awake to listen. Just let the words wash over you like warm water. Let the stories of Zen, this religion of no religion, slowly loosen the grip of your worries and your labels. Bit by bit, you'll see that under all the noise, there is a quiet awareness that has been watching your whole life unfold without judging you, without hurrying you, without demanding that you become someone else. Tonight, we're going to sit beside that awareness together. We'll walk through suffering, desire, ego, work, relationships, and even death. Not as enemies to be fought, but as teachers you were never introduced to properly. And as we do, you may notice something quietly radical. The peace you were chasing out there has been waiting in here the whole time, patient as a friend who never left. All you have to do, for now, is lie back, listen, and let yourself be surprised by how restful true honesty can be. He likes to begin with a scene so simple that most people almost feel exposed when they hear it. The room is dark. The phone screen has finally gone black, and yet the mind is shining brighter than ever. The pillow is soft, but the thoughts are hard. He remembers lying exactly like that, staring at nothing, while inside his chest everything felt like too much. No noise in the house, no chaos outside, and somehow, the loudest place in the universe was the space between his ears. From the outside, it looked peaceful. If someone had opened the door and glanced in, they would have seen a person lying still, breathing, apparently resting. But inside, he was stuck in a traffic jam of thoughts. Regrets parked on one side, fears honking on the other, future plans cutting the lane without warning. That's the part nobody sees. You can look completely calm and yet feel like your mind is sprinting a marathon without your permission. On that particular night, he kept checking the clock like it was judging him. 1:32, 2:09, 2:51. Each new time felt like a little slap. You're still awake. Tomorrow will be ruined. Why can't you just sleep like a normal person? The more he panicked about needing sleep, the further sleep ran away from him. It was like trying to grab water with tense hands. The tighter he squeezed, the more it slipped through. He tried the usual tricks everyone tries, changing sides 100 times, burying his head under the blanket, forcing his eyes shut as if sleep could be intimidated into showing up. He promised himself, "Tomorrow, I'll be different. I'll be organized. I'll be calm. I'll fix everything." But that only made his internal pressure worse. Now he wasn't just tired. He was tired and disappointed in himself in advance. At some point, he did what many of us do and reached for the glowing rectangle again. Just for a minute, he thought, knowing it was a lie. He scrolled through strangers' lives, success stories, perfectly curated happiness. Every image was like a small reminder. Look how far behind you are. Instead of calming him, the feed poured gasoline on his anxious fire. He realized that his bed had turned into the office of his worst critic. In that restless state, he typed something into the search bar that he barely remembers now. Something between "calm my mind" and "I can't stand this anymore." Among guided meditations and motivational speeches, a random title jumped out. Something about Buddhism, something about the religion of no religion. It sounded weird, almost wrong, but his curiosity was stronger than his skepticism at that hour. So he clicked, half desperate, half bored. The voice that came through the speaker wasn't dramatic or mystical. It was slow, clear, almost annoyingly calm. Instead of promising miracles, the person started talking about the mind like an overexcited dog that had never been trained to sit. That image made him smile in the dark. For the first time, someone was describing his suffering without calling him weak, crazy, or broken. They were simply saying, "This is what minds do when they've never learned how to rest." Then came a sentence that hit him harder than any fancy quote. "You are not your thoughts." He had heard variations of that before, but this time his whole body was listening. All his life, his thoughts had arrived with an ID card that said, "Hi, I'm you." If his mind said, "You're a failure," then he was a failure. If it whispered, "Everything will go wrong tomorrow," he believed the prophecy. The idea that he could watch his mind instead of obeying it felt almost illegal. As he lay there, something subtle shifted. His thoughts didn't magically stop, but a small part of his attention stepped back, like someone quietly moving from the stage to the audience. He found himself thinking, "Wow, my mind is really loud tonight," instead of, "I am a disaster tonight." That tiny change in language created a tiny pocket of space inside his chest. It wasn't enlightenment, but it was relief, like opening a window in a stuffy room. He likes to tell you this because he wants you to feel less alone in your own midnight battles. You're not the only one who lies there replaying conversations, inventing future arguments, and negotiating with an alarm clock that doesn't negotiate. He's been there, and he knows how humiliating it feels to be defeated by your own brain in a quiet room. That's why he speaks to you as if you were his only student right now, because at 3 a.m. you are. The video he found didn't ask him to believe in anything new. Nobody said, "Repeat after me," or "Join our group." Instead, the teacher kept inviting him to look directly at his experience. Notice the breath. Notice where tension lives in your body. Notice that thoughts come and go, but something in you is simply watching. It felt less like religion and more like someone finally handing him the user manual to a mind that had been glitching for years. At one point, the speaker mentioned the Buddha, not as a distant statue, but as a person who started with the same basic problem: suffering. No golden aura, no instant powers, just a human being who couldn't stand watching pain without finding out why it was there and whether it could be reduced. That detail mattered to him. He didn't need a superhero. He needed someone who understood what it was like to be trapped in your own head. He remembers the teacher saying that Buddhism doesn't ask you to shut down your doubts. It invites them to sit at the table. That was new. He had always been taught to treat doubt like a villain, something to fight or hide. Now someone was saying, "Bring your doubt, let it speak. Just don't let it drive the car." That approach felt strangely respectful, like his inner chaos wasn't being judged, just explored. For the next few nights, he tried a small experiment. Instead of fighting every thought, he started naming them silently as they passed. Worry about money. Replay of old argument. Fear of failing. It was almost like labeling folders on a messy desktop. The files were still there, but they stopped pile driving him. Naming them turned them from monsters into visitors, and visitors don't get to own the house. He knows you might be thinking, "That sounds too simple to work." He thought the same, but simplicity is sometimes exactly what a tired brain needs. Complex solutions demand energy, and at night, your energy is gone. What Buddhism offered him in that moment wasn't an intellectual system, but a few practical tools that could be used half asleep, in the dark, with no props except his own awareness and breath. He also noticed something unexpected. Just by watching his mind without fighting it, his body began to soften a little, His jaw unclenched, his shoulders sank into the mattress, his breath became less like a sprint and more like a slow walk. He wasn't Zen by any means, but he was less trapped. It was as if his nervous system heard a new message for the first time. We don't have to fix the whole universe tonight. Looking back, he realized that this night of insomnia, which once felt like punishment, was actually a doorway. Without that pain, he'd never have searched, never have clicked, never have listened long enough to hear those strange but liberating ideas. He tells you this because maybe your own restless nights are not just problems to be exterminated, but signals pointing to a deeper path. And that path, which he would later discover through Zen and the so-called religion of no religion, begins the moment you dare to look at your own mind instead of just running from it. He likes to begin with a scene so simple that most people almost feel exposed when they hear it. The room is dark. The phone screen has finally gone black, and yet the mind is shining brighter than ever. The pillow is soft, but the thoughts are hard. He remembers lying exactly like that, staring at nothing, while inside his chest everything felt like too much. No noise in the house, no chaos outside, and somehow, the loudest place in the universe was the space between his ears. From the outside, it looked peaceful. If someone had opened the door and glanced in, they would have seen a person lying still, breathing, apparently resting. But inside, he was stuck in a traffic jam of thoughts. Regrets parked on one side, fears honking on the other, future plans cutting the lane without warning. That's the part nobody sees. You can look completely calm, and yet feel like your mind is sprinting a marathon without your permission. On that particular night, he kept checking the clock like it was judging him. 1:32, 2009, 2:51. Each new time felt like a little slap. You're still awake. Tomorrow will be ruined. Why can't you just sleep like a normal person? The more he panicked about needing sleep, the further sleep ran away from him. It was like trying to grab water with tense hands. The tighter he squeezed, the more it slipped through. He tried the usual tricks everyone tries, changing sides 100 times, burying his head under the blanket, forcing his eyes shut, as if sleep could be intimidated into showing up. He promised himself, tomorrow, I'll be different. I'll be organized. I'll be calm. I'll fix everything. But that only made his internal pressure worse. Now he wasn't just tired. He was tired and disappointed in himself in advance. At some point, he did what many of us do and reached for the glowing rectangle again. Just for a minute, he thought, knowing it was a lie. He scrolled through strangers' lives, success stories, perfectly curated happiness. Every image was like a small reminder. Look how far behind you are. Instead of calming him, the feed poured gasoline on his anxious fire. He realized that his bed had turned into the office of his worst critic. In that restless state, he typed something into the search bar that he barely remembers now. Something between "calm my mind" and "I can't stand this anymore." Among guided meditations and motivational speeches, a random title jumped out. Something about Buddhism. Something about the religion of no religion. It sounded weird, almost wrong, but his curiosity was stronger than his skepticism at that hour. So he clicked, half desperate, half bored. The voice that came through the speaker wasn't dramatic or mystical. It was slow, clear, almost annoyingly calm. Instead of promising miracles, the person started talking about the mind like an overexcited dog that had never been trained to sit. That image made him smile in the dark. For the first time, someone was describing his suffering without calling him weak, crazy, or broken. They were simply saying, This is what minds do when they've never learned how to rest. Then came a sentence that hit him harder than any fancy quote. You are not your thoughts. He had heard variations of that before, but this time his whole body was listening. All his life, his thoughts had arrived with an ID card that said, "Hi, I'm you." If his mind said, "You're a failure," then he was a failure. If it whispered, "Everything will go wrong tomorrow," he believed the prophecy. The idea that he could watch his mind instead of obeying it felt almost illegal. As he lay there, something subtle shifted. His thoughts didn't magically stop, but a small part of his attention stepped back, like someone quietly moving from the stage to the audience. He found himself thinking, "Wow, my mind is really loud tonight," instead of, "I am a disaster tonight." That tiny change in language created a tiny pocket of space inside his chest. It wasn't enlightenment, but it was relief, like opening a window in a stuffy room. He likes to tell you this because he wants you to feel less alone in your own midnight battles. You're not the only one who lies there replaying conversations, inventing future arguments, and negotiating with an alarm clock that doesn't negotiate. He's been there, and he knows how humiliating it feels to be defeated by your own brain in a quiet room. That's why he speaks to you as if you were his only student right now, because at 3 a.m. you are. The video he found didn't ask him to believe in anything new. Nobody said, "Repeat after me," or "Join our group." Instead, the teacher kept inviting him to look directly at his experience. Notice the breath. Notice where tension lives in your body. Notice that thoughts come and go, but something in you is simply watching. It felt less like religion and more like someone finally handing him the user manual to a mind that had been glitching for years. At one point, the speaker mentioned the Buddha, not as a distant statue, but as a person who started with the same basic problem: suffering. No golden aura, no instant powers. Just a human being who couldn't stand watching pain without finding out why it was there and whether it could be reduced. That detail mattered to him. He didn't need a superhero. He needed someone who understood what it was like to be trapped in your own head. He remembers the teacher saying that Buddhism doesn't ask you to shut down your doubts. It invites them to sit at the table. That was new. He had always been taught to treat doubt like a villain, something to fight or hide. Now someone was saying, "Bring your doubt, let it speak. Just don't let it drive the car." That approach felt strangely respectful, like his inner chaos wasn't being judged, just explored. For the next few nights, he tried a small experiment. Instead of fighting every thought, he started naming them silently as they passed. Worry about money. Replay of old argument. Fear of failing. It was almost like labeling folders on a messy desktop. The files were still there, but they stopped pile driving him. Naming them turned them from monsters into visitors, and visitors don't get to own the house. He knows you might be thinking, "That sounds too simple to work." He thought the same, but simplicity is sometimes exactly what a tired brain needs. Complex solutions demand energy, and at night, your energy is gone. What Buddhism offered him in that moment wasn't an intellectual system, but a few practical tools that could be used half asleep, in the dark, with no props except his own awareness and breath. He also noticed something unexpected. Just by watching his mind without fighting it, his body began to soften a little. His jaw unclenched, his shoulders sank into the mattress, his breath became less like a sprint and more like a slow walk. He wasn't Zen by any means, but he was less trapped. It was as if his nervous system heard a new message for the first time. We don't have to fix the whole universe tonight. Looking back, he realized that this night of insomnia, which once felt like punishment, was actually a doorway. Without that pain, he'd never have searched, never have clicked, never have listened long enough to hear those strange but liberating ideas. He tells you this because maybe your own restless nights are not just problems to be exterminated, but signals pointing to a deeper path. And that path, which he would later discover through Zen and the so-called religion of no religion, begins the moment you dare to look at your own mind instead of just running from it. He still remembers the first time he heard that old Buddhist image, a child licking honey off the edge of a sharp knife. At first, he thought, okay, that's a bit dramatic. But the more he watched his own life honestly, the more that image stopped being poetry and started being biography. Desire always arrived with a sweet promise. Just get this one thing, and then you'll finally rest. The sweetness was real. The cuts were real too. He knows you've felt that in your own way. Maybe for you it was, when I earn this salary, I'll finally be at peace. Or, when I lose this weight, find this person, move to that place, hit that number. Then I'll stop worrying. And sure, when you got closer to it, there was a rush, a temporary high. But 1 week later, the mind had quietly updated the target. Suddenly, peace had moved a few meters ahead again. He likes to compare it to those apps that constantly update their terms and conditions without asking your permission. You think you've finally accepted the deal with life. If I achieve X, I can relax. But then the mind pops up. Actually, now it has to be Y. It's like climbing an escalator that's going down. No matter how fast you run, you never quite feel like you've arrived where you're supposed to be. Modern life just gave the honey new packaging. Instead of a jar on a shelf, it's the glow of a notification, the sound of a message, the spike of attention when someone comments, likes, or checks on you. Each little buzz feels like a drop of sweetness. You're seen, you exist, you matter. But when the phone goes silent, something strange happens. The quiet doesn't feel peaceful, it feels empty. That's where the blade hides. He went through a season where numbers ruled his mood. Views, followers, income, productivity hours, all silently deciding if today he was worth something or not. He told himself, when I hit that milestone, I'll finally feel safe. The day he reached it, he was happy. For about an afternoon. By the next morning, his mind had already moved the finish line. That's when he realized the problem wasn't the goal, it was the hunger behind it. To make it simple, he asks you to imagine a phone battery that never shows 100%, no matter how long you charge it. It gets to 73%, sometimes 81%, but it always drops back down. That's what living inside unconscious desire feels like. You tell yourself, just a bit more, just one more step. But the sense of almost enough, but not quite, never really leaves. It's exhausting, especially when you're lying awake in the dark. He's not anti-dreams or anti-ambition. He doesn't want you to throw away your projects, your plans, your drive. The point isn't to kill desire. The point is to see what kind of desire is driving you. There's a huge difference between I'd love to create this because it feels alive, and if I don't get this, I am nothing. One desire opens your chest. The other squeezes it like a fist. He suggests a very practical exercise you can play with tomorrow. Choose one thing you really want right now. More money, recognition, a relationship, a result. Then ask, what do I believe this will give me emotionally? Maybe it's safety, freedom, respect, feeling finally enough. When you name the feeling behind the object, You're already stepping away from the knife and looking at the honey with clearer eyes. He shares one of his own desires because he knows it might look like yours in different clothes. For a long time, he desperately wanted a certain car. Not just liked it, needed it. When he sat down and asked, "What do I think this car will give me?" the answer was simple: respect, proof that he had made it, the feeling of not being small. He realized he wasn't chasing leather seats. He was chasing a story about himself. That's why he says desire is rarely about the thing. It's about the feeling you hope the thing will deliver to your heart. The problem is that objects can't permanently give you what only a deeper shift inside can offer. So you get the thing, your nervous system celebrates for a bit, and then the emptiness calmly returns to its seat. Just like a movie that ends and credits roll, the mind quietly says, "Next." He likes another picture for this: drinking salty water in the ocean. You are absolutely thirsty. The water absolutely wets your mouth. But the more you drink, the thirstier you become. More achievements, more attention, more purchases, more distractions. None of them are evil by themselves. But if you're using them to fix a feeling of "I am not enough," they often behave like salt. There is contact, but no true quenching. At night, this mechanism is brutal. You lie down hoping for rest, and desire starts a PowerPoint presentation in your head. Slide 1. What you haven't achieved yet. Slide 2. What others already have. Slide 3. Everything you should be by now. Your body is horizontal, but your nervous system is running uphill. Sleep doesn't come because your mind is convinced resting is dangerous until everything is finally under control. Buddhism doesn't break into the room yelling, "Stop desiring." That would just become another desire, the desire not to desire. Instead, it invites you to look at desire with the same kind of gentle curiosity you'd use with a child. You watch how it appears, what it promises, how it feels in your chest or stomach, and what happens when you don't immediately obey. That shift from "I am desire" to "Ah, desire is here" is already a spiritual step. He recommends a small trick that helped him a lot when he was stuck in the middle of the night. When a thought arose like, "I need to fix my life," he added silently, "Right now, in this exact moment, lying in bed. I need more money. Right now, in this exact moment, lying in bed." It sounds almost ridiculous when you phrase it like that. You start to see how much artificial urgency your mind creates out of habit. Over time, he began to notice that not all desires felt the same in his body. Some burned with anxiety, comparison, and shame. They tightened his jaw and sped up his heart. Others felt strangely clean. The desire to learn, to serve, to love better, to live with more truth. Those didn't slice him up. They felt like a quiet fire in a fireplace, not a wildfire in a dry forest. That distinction changed everything. He wants you to understand something subtle but crucial. The goal isn't to become cold or indifferent. The goal is to stop hurting yourself in the name of success. When you look honestly at your desires, without guilt, you start asking wiser questions. Will this truly nourish me, or just distract me for a little while? That kind of honesty is already a form of meditation, even if you're just sitting in your car or lying with your eyes open in the dark. And yet, he knows that desire doesn't live only in thoughts and ideas. It lives in the flesh, in tight shoulders, shallow breaths, clenched jaws, restless legs. If you really want to transform your relationship with desire and finally sleep in your own skin, you can't stay only in philosophy. You have to learn how to meet the body where anxiety shows up, especially at night. That's where the next part of this journey starts to get very real. He likes to say that anxiety is not a thought problem first. It's a body problem that thoughts learned how to decorate. Before the story, "Something is wrong with me" appears, there is a tight chest, a faster heartbeat, a knot in the stomach. He remembers realizing this one night when he tried to think positively, and nothing changed. His thoughts were giving motivational speeches, but his nervous system was still shaking under the table like a scared dog during a storm. From the outside, anxiety is invisible. You can be lying perfectly still, eyes closed, looking peaceful, while inside your body, alarms are ringing. The heart speeds up, the breath gets shallow, the muscles tense as if something is about to explode, even though the room is quiet. That's one of the cruelest parts. Nobody sees how hard your body is working just to stay in bed and not run away from a danger that isn't even in the room. For a long time, his instinct was to fight those sensations. Tight chest, breathe harder, fast heart, panic about having a heart attack, restless legs, get angry at his own body. The logic was simple. If I hate this enough, it will go away. But the body doesn't work like a machine you can shout at. The more he resisted the sensations, the louder they got. It was like trying to calm a crying child by yelling, "Stop crying!" in its face. Buddhism offered him a completely different, almost shocking suggestion. What if you stopped trying to get rid of the feelings and started getting curious about them? Instead of, "This is wrong, this is bad, this has to stop," the attitude becomes, "What exactly is happening here? Where in the body is the anxiety strongest? Is it hot or cold? Moving or still? Tight or buzzing?" This sounds small, but it changes everything. He likes to give a very simple exercise anyone can do, even half asleep. When anxiety shows up at night, instead of jumping immediately into thoughts about tomorrow, bring your attention to 3 spots: your chest, your throat, your stomach. Just notice which one feels the most intense. Don't try to fix it. Just observe. Sometimes you'll realize it's not your whole life that's falling apart. It's one specific knot in one specific part of the body. At first, this observation can feel fake, like pretending to be calm while actually freaking out inside. He understands that. When he started, his inner voice was screaming, "This isn't working. This is stupid. I'm still scared." The trick is, you don't have to shut that voice up. You just add another layer to it. Here is fear. Here is a tight chest. Here is a fast heart. You're not denying the storm. You're noticing the storm and the sky around it. He uses a simple image. Imagine you're watching waves crashing on the shore. If you put your face right into the wave, that's all you see, and you get knocked over. But if you take a few steps back, you see the wave and the ocean behind it. Anxiety is the wave. Awareness is the ocean. When he first heard that, he thought it was just pretty language. But lying in bed one night, he realized there's fear here, but there's also something watching the fear. In Zen, they don't ask you to believe in that something as a dogma. They ask you to feel it directly. So he started practicing tiny body check-ins during the day, not just at night. In traffic, in a queue, scrolling on his phone. Where is my body right now? How's my breathing? Is my jaw clenched? The more he practiced during calm moments, the easier it became to remember in the middle of the night storm. One of the most liberating insights for him was this: anxiety is often the body saying, "You've been running too fast for too long." Not just physically, but mentally. Jumping between apps, worries, tasks, comparisons. Your nervous system hasn't had a chance to complete a single cycle of rest. So when you finally lie down, it doesn't trust that it's safe yet. It keeps scanning for danger, because that's the job nobody taught it to stop doing. Instead of blaming himself, he started treating his body more like a tired employee who had been on a double shift for years. When the anxiety came, he imagined placing a hand on his chest, even if he didn't physically move. The message was simple. I see you. You've been working hard. Thank you. We're safe for now. It felt cheesy at first, but the body understands tone more than words. That gentle attitude began to lower the volume. He's honest about this. It didn't turn him into a Buddha floating in silence. There were still nights of racing thoughts and tight muscles. But the difference was that he no longer believed anxiety meant, I am broken. Instead, he saw it as, my system is tired and overprotective right now. That small shift removed layers of shame. You can't heal something you're busy hating. Buddhism helped him hate himself less in the moments he needed compassion the most. He also discovered that some triggers were very predictable. Too much caffeine, too much news, constant social media, no real breaks. It was like feeding his nervous system energy drinks and then begging it to sleep like a baby. So he began experimenting like a scientist. Less caffeine after a certain hour, slower nights without a glowing screen right in his face, short walks instead of more scrolling. Not as self-punishment, but as an experiment in kindness. Sometimes people ask him, but what do I do when the anxiety is really strong? He answers with 3 steps. First, feel the feet. Notice where they touch the mattress, the ground, the fabric. Second, feel the breath, not to control it, but to ride it like a surfer rides a wave. Third, name gently, fear is here, tightness is here, heat is here. You won't always feel better instantly, but you will feel less alone inside your own skin. He realized that anxiety gets worse when it feels like it has to fight alone in the dark. When awareness joins the feeling, it's like turning on a small lamp in a scary room. The monster in the corner is still there, but now you can see that it's just a pile of clothes and a shadow. The heart might still race, but your relationship to the racing changes. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what is my body trying to tell me tonight? Over time, he noticed something quiet. The nights when he met his anxiety with curiosity and kindness, even if he slept less, he woke up feeling slightly more resilient, not completely destroyed. The nights when he fought himself, judged himself, and tried to force sleep like a task, he woke up feeling like he'd been in a war, the same number of hours in bed, but completely different quality of rest. And once he understood anxiety as a messenger in the body, not just a curse in the brain, another question started to arise almost by itself. If the body can react this intensely to fear, what else is it capable of? What happens when the mind stops living only in threats and starts to see the different worlds or inner landscapes it visits every day? Hells, heavens, and everything in between. That curiosity began to open the door to a much deeper map of the human experience that the old Buddhist masters called the 6 realms. He likes to say that Buddhism gave him a language for something he had always felt, but never knew how to describe. The feeling that his inner world changes like countries on a map. Same body, same bed, same pillow, but completely different worlds inside. The old teachers called these worlds the 6 realms, not places in the sky or underground, but psychological landscapes the mind visits every single day, often without telling you it has packed its bags. The hell realm is easy to recognize. It's those moments when everything feels on fire inside, even if nothing dramatic is happening outside. Shame, rage, despair, panic. Like being locked in a mental room with alarms blaring. You know this realm when you keep refreshing apps, buying things you don't need, seeking messages from someone who doesn't answer, and no amount of more fills that subtle emptiness behind your ribs. The animal realm isn't about actual animals. It's about living on pure instinct and habit, without awareness. He remembers lying in the dark, thinking, "My life is over," after one embarrassing mistake at work. Objectively, nothing catastrophic had happened, but his nervous system had stamped his inner passport. Welcome to hell. Then there's the hungry ghost realm, which might be the unofficial headquarters of the modern world. In the old images, these beings have huge empty stomachs and tiny mouths, always wanting, never satisfied. Today, they just carry smartphones. He notices this realm when he eats without tasting, watches video after video without remembering the last one, or automatically says yes to everything out of fear, not choice. It's not evil, it's just unconscious. Like driving on a highway and suddenly realizing you don't remember the last 10 minutes. The body was there, but you were not. The angry god realm, or Asura realm, is where comparison and competition run the show. Here the mind constantly asks, who is ahead? Who is behind? Who threatened my status? It shows up in arguments that escalate over nothing, in jealous scrolling, in imaginary fights you have in the shower. He has caught himself rehearsing comebacks to conversations that never happened. At that moment, inside, he was already living in a war zone of his own making. The God realm sounds beautiful at first. It's the state of pleasure, success, and comfort. Things are going well. People admire you. The numbers look good. The sun seems to shine just for you. There's nothing wrong with this, but the danger is believing it will last forever. He calls this the vacation that never ends, illusion. When life inevitably shifts, people fall hard because they secretly thought they had bought permanent happiness. And then there is the human realm, which Buddhism surprisingly treats as the best place to wake up. Not because it's perfect, but because it's balanced. Here we have enough comfort to reflect and enough suffering to stay humble. He recognizes the human realm in quiet mornings with coffee, in honest conversations, in those nights when you're not ecstatic, not destroyed, just present, aware that life is fragile and precious at the same time. What shocked him when he learned this map is how often we visit several realms in a single day. You might wake up in the God realm after good news, drop into the Asura realm in traffic, slide into the animal realm at lunch on autopilot, fall into the hungry ghost realm after work scrolling, and end the night in the hell realm replaying fears. No airplanes, no passports, just one nervous system traveling non-stop. At night, this map becomes especially vivid. Lying in bed, you can feel like you're in the hell realm when shame burns, in the hungry ghost realm when you ache for a message or validation, in the animal realm when you're numb and disconnected, or in the human realm when you can actually feel everything without drowning. The body stays on the mattress. The mind, however, is a restless traveler hopping between worlds. He remembers one specific night when he finally saw this clearly. In a single hour, he went from panic, hell, to craving someone's attention, hungry ghost, to mindless scrolling, animal, to imagining arguments, asura, to briefly remembering his breath, human. Same room, same silence. same blanket. The only thing that changed was the realm his mind believed in at that moment. Realizing this made his suffering feel less like fate and more like weather. So he began turning this ancient map into a simple, practical habit. When things got intense, he'd quietly ask himself, which realm am I in right now? Not to blame himself, but to name the landscape. If he felt endless lack, he'd say, hungry ghost. If everything felt hostile, okay, hell realm. The moment he named it, a tiny part of him stepped outside the story. It was no longer, this is reality forever, but this is the realm I'm passing through. He likes to compare it to being in a theme park without a map. If you don't know where you are, every ride feels permanent. You might think, this horror ride is my whole life now. But once someone hands you a map and says, relax, this is just one zone. There are exits. There are other areas. Your body still reacts on the roller coaster, but you're not as terrified. Awareness doesn't delete the ride. It changes how you experience it. One important detail he emphasizes, none of these realms make you bad. They just show where your mind is practicing at the moment. Feeling like a hungry ghost doesn't mean you're greedy. It means a part of you is starving for something deeper than the thing you're chasing. Being in hell doesn't mean you're doomed. It means pain is loud and needs care, not judgment. When you stop moralizing your inner weather, it's easier to walk through the storm. He also noticed that moments of genuine presence often felt like stepping into the human realm, even if nothing external changed. Same problem, same uncertainty, but now there was a bit of space around it. It's like standing at a window and watching rain instead of being lost in the middle of a flood. The water is still there, but your position relative to it is very different. As this awareness grew, another question began quietly knocking on his inner door. If the mind keeps visiting all these different realms, who is it that's doing the traveling? If he can watch himself move from hell to hungry ghost to human within the same hour, maybe he is not any of those realms. Maybe he is not even the character inside them, but something larger, something deeper, that witnesses the whole journey. That question, which started like a whisper in the back of his mind, slowly became impossible to ignore. If he is not the anxious realm, not the craving realm, not even the peaceful realm, then who or what is he really? And it's exactly at this point, when a person dares to look past the stories and moods, that Buddhism brings in one of its most radical and freeing ideas. The possibility that the solid self we cling to is not as solid as we were taught to believe. He remembers the exact night the question finally hit him with full force. If my mood changes every hour, if my roles change all the time, who exactly is this me I keep trying to fix? Lying there in the dark, he could feel yesterday's version of himself already fading. The brave one, the insecure one, the calm one, the jealous one. They all felt real when they appeared, but none of them stayed. It was like watching different actors borrow the same costume. During the day, it was easier to forget this. He had labels to lean on: job title, relationship status, age, nationality, even the little bio on social media. Those gave a sense of solidity, like stickers on a suitcase. This belongs to me. But at night, in the quiet, those labels didn't help much. The fear, the longing, the memories, they didn't ask for his resume. They just showed up and sat on his chest. Buddhism came in with a question so simple, it almost sounded offensive. Are you sure you are this story you tell about yourself? Not, do you exist? But, are you really this fixed, separate thing you imagine? At first, he resisted. He thought, "Of course I'm me. Who else would I be?" But then he noticed something strange. His sense of me changed, depending on who was in the room, what day it was, and how much sleep he had gotten. He likes to use a very down-to-earth example. Think about how you act with your family, your friends, your boss, and when you're alone. Same body, same name, but completely different versions appear. With one person, you're the caretaker. With another, you're the clown. With another, you're the quiet listener. Which one is the real you? If you say all of them, then you're already closer to what the Buddha was pointing at. The Buddha's insight wasn't that you're a nobody. It was that you're not a thing, not a fixed object like a rock you can put on a shelf. You're more like a river, always there, always flowing, never exactly the same twice. On Monday, you might feel strong and clear. On Tuesday, muddy and confused. The river is real, but try to grab one permanent piece of it, and it slips through your fingers. He remembers doing a little experiment that shook him more than any fancy philosophy. He sat down and tried to find the self inside his own experience. Was it in his thoughts? But his thoughts changed every second. Was it in his emotions? Those shifted like weather. Was it in his body? Cells dying and renewing all the time. Where exactly was this solid me he had been defending so fiercely? He didn't find a little glowing ball called self anywhere. What he found instead was a constant dance. Sensations, thoughts, memories, images, beliefs, roles. Like an app with many windows open at once. None of them alone could be called me, but together they created a convincing illusion. It's the same way a movie looks like one fluid story, even though it's really just a rapid sequence of single frames. At first, this idea scared him. If there's no solid self, then what am I? Nothing. That's a very common misunderstanding. Buddhism isn't saying you don't exist. It's saying you don't exist as an isolated, unchanging block separated from everything else. You're more like a note in a song. The note is real, but it only makes sense in relation to the other notes around it. He likes to compare it to a wave in the ocean. If a wave could talk, it might say, "I'm this tall, this strong, this important." It might compare itself to other waves, feel proud or ashamed. But all along, it was never separate from the ocean. When the wave disappears, the water doesn't vanish. It simply changes form. Buddhism is gently whispering, "You're water that forgot it was water, and thinks it's only the shape of this particular wave." This might sound very abstract, but it has a surprisingly practical effect, especially at night. When he lay in bed thinking, "I am anxious, I am a failure, I am ruined," everything felt heavy and permanent. When he began to see those as temporary experiences passing through awareness. Anxiety is here, shame is here, memory is here. They still hurt, but they no longer defined him completely. He became the sky, not the storm. He invites you to try something simple right now. Instead of saying, "I am anxious," experiment with "anxiety is present." Instead of "I am broken," try "pain is here." This sounds like a small language trick, but it's not. It shifts you from being the problem to being the space that notices the problem. The bed, the room, the darkness stay the same, but the inner position you watch from changes. He also realized that the belief in a solid, separate self was secretly exhausting. It meant he had to constantly defend this me, protect its image, prove its value, hide its flaws. Every mistake felt like an attack on his existence. Every criticism seemed like a knife aimed at his core. No wonder his shoulders were tense and his sleep was fragile. He wasn't just living. He was guarding a castle 24/7. When he started to loosen his grip on this castle, something unexpected happened. He didn't become irresponsible or passive. He actually became kinder. If he wasn't a fixed, perfect statue, he could allow himself to learn, apologize, change direction. He could admit, "Today I'm confused," without collapsing. He could see others the same way, not as fixed villains or saints, but as rivers flowing through their own storms. Buddhism calls this insight no self, but he prefers to explain it as more than just this self. You're not only the character with your name, your past, your worries, you're also the awareness that watches this character move through the 6 realms: hell, hungry ghost, animal, angry God, human, and God. That awareness doesn't shrink when the mood shifts. It's there when you're panicking, and it's there when you're peaceful. At night, when thoughts get loud, remembering this can be a quiet revolution. Instead of wrestling with every story, what if I fail? What if they leave? What if I'm not enough? You can gently shift focus. Who is hearing these thoughts? Who is feeling this tightness? Who is watching this movie? You don't need a perfect answer. The question itself starts to pull you out of the whirlpool and back into the wider ocean. Over time, he noticed that this perspective didn't erase his personality. He still had preferences, habits, quirks. He still loved certain music, got annoyed in traffic, enjoyed certain foods. The difference was that he no longer believed those things were the total truth of who he is. They became clothes he could wear and change, not skin he was trapped inside. That made the nights feel less like prison and more like a temporary room. And once he had tasted, even slightly, the freedom of not being a rigid, isolated someone, another layer of Buddhist teaching began to make much more sense. If he wasn't separate, then his life was woven into everything around him. The air, the people, the planet, even the smallest everyday event turned into a mirror of this deep interconnection. That realization would lead him straight into the next insight. That reality itself can be seen through different worlds or levels, all happening at the same time. He likes to joke that before he found Buddhism, he thought reality only had one resolution setting. What you see is what you get. Table is table. Problem is problem. Me is me. End of story. Then he stumbled on an old Buddhist teaching that said, in a very polite way, "You're not wrong. You're just seeing only the first layer." It was like discovering that his TV had been on standard definition his whole life, and someone quietly switched it to 4K. The old Zen teachers talked about 4 worlds, or 4 ways of seeing reality. Don't worry about the strange names. Think of them as 4 different camera modes on the same phone. You don't change the world by changing the mode. You just change how much of the truth you're actually noticing. The first mode is the world of particulars, the everyday world: pillows, phones, bills, people, traffic lights, that one noisy neighbor. In this first world, everything looks separate. Your pillow is here, your worries are there, your boss is over there, your heart is in here. It's the level where we say, "That's my car, that's your job, that's their problem. And there's nothing wrong with this." If you forget this level, you'll walk into walls and miss your rent payments. Buddhism never asks you to pretend particular things don't exist. But if you stay only here, life becomes a constant game of me versus everything else. My success, your success. My loss, your gain. The mind gets trapped in what he calls box thinking. Everything is a separate box with a name on it. At night, those boxes crawl into bed with you. Money box, relationship box, past box, future box. No wonder it's hard to sleep with so many open tabs. The second world the Buddha pointed to is the world of unity. This is when you suddenly sense that everything is connected underneath the surface. It can happen in simple moments. Watching the sunset, listening to music, holding a child, even washing dishes. For a second, the edges between me and not me feel a little softer. You don't disappear. You just feel less like a lonely island and more like part of the ocean. He remembers experiencing this while walking alone at night. No mystical lights, no angels, no special soundtrack, just the sound of his own footsteps and the wind. For a brief moment, he felt, I'm not standing in the world. I am part of this whole movement. The street, the sky, his breath, the silent buildings. Somehow it all felt like one big, quiet thing breathing together. Then his phone buzzed and the spell broke. But the taste stayed. That second world is like zooming out on a map. When you're too zoomed in, you only see one street and worry it's the whole planet. Zoom out, and you realize that street is part of a city, in a country, on a planet, in a universe. Your problem doesn't vanish, but it stops feeling like the only thing that exists. This unity view doesn't make your bills disappear, but it does keep them from becoming your entire universe. The third world is his favorite, because it's where spirituality gets practical. Freud. It's the world where the particular and the universal work together, like a song where both the melody and the rhythm matter. Here, you can drink a cup of tea and feel both. This is just tea, and this moment is mysteriously precious. It's not either or, it's both. And Zen people love to live here. In this world, washing dishes is still washing dishes. There's soap, water, plates, maybe a bit of boredom, but there's also a quiet awareness that this very simple act is connected to everything. The people you'll feed tomorrow, the farmer who grew the food, the water system, the earth that gave the clay for the plate. Suddenly, ordinary actions stop feeling like wasted time and start feeling like small threads in a huge tapestry. He started experimenting with this at night. When he couldn't sleep, instead of seeing the bed as just a bed, he began to notice the fabric touching his skin, the air in the room, the distant sounds outside. He imagined the cotton fields, the people who built the mattress, the electricity that powers the fan, the entire chain of causes that allowed him to lie there. His mind became less obsessed with one narrow worry and more aware of being held by a much bigger web. Then comes the fourth world, which sounds like pure poetry until you feel even a little of it. It's the world where every single thing implies every other thing, like a room of mirrors where each reflection contains all the others. In this way of seeing, nothing is just itself. Your small action, your sentence, your mood sends ripples that touch everything, not as a metaphor, as the actual structure of reality. He likes to explain it with something simple. Sending a message at 2:22 a.m. Maybe you think it's just a text, but it changes the other person's night, their mood, their decisions the next morning, how they speak to someone else, how that someone treats their child, and so on. One message in the dark can shift an entire small piece of the world. Suddenly, your existence doesn't feel meaningless. It feels dangerously meaningful. This fourth world is why the old Zen masters said that drinking tea can be cosmic. Not because the tea is magic, but because that one sip includes the sun, the rain, the soil, the workers, Your body, your ancestors, your future. It's all there, hidden inside something so ordinary you'd usually rush through it without looking. When you start to feel this, just another day stops existing. Every day becomes a meeting of infinite causes. At first, this can actually feel heavy. If everything is connected, then everything I do matters. That's a lot of responsibility. He felt that too. But over time, it became less of a burden and more of a comfort. If everything is connected, then you're never really alone in your fight. Your healing affects others. Your peace at 3 a.m. is not just yours. It subtly radiates into your words, your choices, your presence tomorrow. He often tells people, you don't need to believe in these four worlds like a doctrine. Just notice how you already move between them. When you're stressed, you're stuck in the first world, separate, small, squeezed. When you feel deeply moved by music or nature, you're tasting the second. When you suddenly feel gratitude while doing something ordinary, you're in the third. And when you sense that every tiny thing matters, you're flirting with the fourth. This whole teaching is not about choosing one world and abandoning the others. A wise life is more like learning to use all four camera modes when needed. Sometimes you must focus on the practical. Pay bills, send emails, brush teeth. Sometimes you need to zoom out and remember you're part of something vast. Sometimes you blend them. Sometimes you sense the whole universe in a single breath before sleep. And yet, even this beautiful map can become another thing the mind clings to. Am I in the right world now? Am I spiritual enough? Am I doing it correctly? He's seen people turn even these teachings into pressure. That's why, after talking about all these levels and layers, Buddhism comes back with one of its most down-to-earth messages, the path of the middle, the art of not falling into extremes, even the extreme of overcomplicating spirituality itself. He says one of the most underrated superpowers in Buddhism is something very simple and very unglamorous: balance. Not the kind of balance people post on social media, but the quiet middle path the Buddha discovered by burning himself at both extremes. First, a life of pleasure and comfort. Then, a life of brutal self-punishment. Only when both failed did he realize truth doesn't live at the edges. It lives in the space in between. He likes to imagine the Buddha as someone who tried the two most common strategies we still use today. The first strategy is, if I can just surround myself with enough comfort, I'll be safe. Nice things, entertainment, good food, distractions. The second is, if I make my life hard enough and discipline myself brutally, I'll become pure and strong. Both seem promising. Both turned out to be traps. For him, this isn't just ancient history. It's painfully modern. He's lived both extremes. There were phases when he chased pleasure and escape. Food, screens, endless scrolling. When discomfort appeared, he ran. There were other phases when he treated himself like a soldier in a war. Zero rest, no kindness, punishing routines, harsh self-talk. Both styles had one thing in common: they never truly brought peace. The middle way isn't about being halfway lazy or halfway rigid. It's something deeper. It's the art of noticing when the mind is leaning too far in one direction and gently leaning the other way to find center again. If he notices he's been escaping too much into comfort, he brings in a bit more discipline. If he notices he's been whipping himself with guilt and pressure, he invites more gentleness. He often uses the image of a guitar string. Too loose, and it doesn't play. Too tight, and it snaps. The Buddha wasn't saying, don't play. He was saying, tune it. Your life, your practice, Even the way you try to sleep at night needs that tuning. If you force sleep, it runs away. If you don't care at all and live in total chaos, restful sleep also avoids you. The middle way is learning how to hold yourself firmly but kindly. He noticed this in his own evenings. There were nights when he tried to control everything perfectly. Strict schedules, no flexibility, attacking himself if he broke a single rule. There were other nights when he gave up entirely, staying on his phone for hours, eating anything, ignoring his body. In both cases, he woke up tired. It wasn't the rules or the lack of them that were the problem. It was the spirit behind them. Fear, not wisdom. The middle way starts with a very honest question. What am I overdoing right now? Maybe it's overthinking. Maybe it's overworking. Maybe it's overindulging. The follow-up question is just as important. What am I neglecting? Rest, movement, real connection, silence, honest conversation. This isn't about self-judgment. It's about seeing the seesaw clearly so you can stop pretending it's level when it obviously isn't. He remembers a period when he tried to solve his anxiety with extreme spirituality. Meditate for hours, strict diets, endless self-analysis. No fun, no pleasure, no softness allowed. He thought, if I take this path seriously enough, I'll become peaceful. What actually happened was that his world became smaller, stiffer, heavier. He had traded external distractions for internal obsession. Different costume, same imbalance. On the other side, he knew times when he used balance as an excuse. I deserve this. Life is short. I'll fix it later. More sweets, more scrolling, more late nights, more ignoring his inner signals. He called it living, but it was really avoiding. When his body finally demanded payment in the form of burnout, he realized that calling something self-care doesn't make it true care if it's secretly self-sabotage. In Buddhism, the middle way isn't some boring compromise. It's actually very dynamic. The Buddha would often teach one thing to someone who was too indulgent, and the opposite thing to someone who was too harsh with themselves. If a person hated their body, he encouraged kindness. If someone worshipped their comfort, he challenged them to step out of it. Same truth, different medicine, depending on the illness. He likes to apply this directly to the mind at night. If your thoughts are racing at 200 km/h, the middle way isn't to force them to zero. It's to gently slow them down. Maybe you don't go from chaos to perfect silence. Maybe you go from chaos to one simple anchor, your breathing, a phrase, a feeling of gratitude. Instead of demanding, stop thinking now, you invite, let's think less loudly for a while. He also sees the middle way in how we deal with emotions. One extreme is suppressing them. I shouldn't feel this. I need to be strong. This is stupid. The other extreme is drowning in them, replaying the story, feeding the anger, hugging the sadness until it becomes your entire identity. The middle way is, I feel this. I won't deny it. But I also won't let it drive the car. You let the emotion ride in the back seat, not grab the steering wheel. A practical example he loves. Imagine you had a very hard day. One extreme is punishing yourself for not being productive enough and forcing more work late into the night. The other is numbing yourself with endless distractions until 3 a.m. The middle way might look like this. You acknowledge the rough day. Do one small, meaningful action to close it, like writing down tomorrow's 3 priorities, and then consciously choose a simple, calming activity before bed. He wants you to notice how often your mind speaks in extremes. Always. Never. Everything. Nothing. I'll never change. This always happens to me. If I don't fix this now, everything will collapse. Those are the mental versions of starving yourself or binging. Buddhism invites you to gently replace them with softer, truer phrases. Not always, but often. This happens a lot, and I'd like to change it. Maybe not everything depends on tonight. Over time, walking the middle path feels less like walking on a tightrope and more like learning to surf. The waves of life still come. Stress, joy, loss, surprise. But instead of trying to freeze the ocean or escape the beach, you learn to adjust in real time. Too far forward, lean back. Too far back, lean in. Balance stops being a static goal and becomes a living skill. And as he practiced this, a quiet realization began to grow in him. The middle way isn't just a technique for personal peace. It's also the logic behind some of Zen's strangest methods. Those paradoxical answers. Those weird stories that seem to say one thing and its opposite at the same time. Underneath the confusion, there's a purpose. To knock us out of our extremes and point us directly to a freedom that logic alone can't reach. He admits that the first time he heard a Zen story, he thought, these people are either enlightened or completely crazy. A student asks, what is Buddha? And the master answers, 3 pounds of flax. Someone else asks about ultimate reality, and the reply is, it's windy again this morning. At first, it feels like listening to a wise person who refuses to answer a single question directly. The more he studied, the more he realized the masters weren't avoiding the questions. They were avoiding the trap inside the questions. When someone says, what is the ultimate thing? The mind wants a perfect definition to grab and store. Zen knows that any definition, no matter how poetic, becomes just another concept to cling to. So instead of feeding the mind, the master points beyond it. He likes to compare it to a person who keeps asking, what is fire, while standing in front of a fireplace, freezing? The Zen master doesn't hand him a scientific explanation about combustion. He pushes his hands closer to the flames and says, feel. It's not that words are useless. It's that some truths can only be known by direct contact. Zen's weird answers are attempts to warm your hands, not entertain your brain. One of the most famous tools of this direct style is the koan, a question or statement that can't be solved with logic alone. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Who were you before your parents were born? If you try to answer like in school, you'll go in circles. That's exactly the point. The koan is a carefully crafted frustration designed to exhaust the mind's usual tricks. He remembers trying to outsmart a koan once. He read commentaries, watched videos, analyzed every word. The more he studied, the more frustrated he became. It was like trying to open a door by pushing on the wall next to it. Only when he got tired of being clever and just sat with the question, letting it echo in silence, did something soften. The koan didn't give him an answer. It changed the place he was listening from. He likes to say that a good koan is like a splinter in your usual way of thinking. You can't ignore it. It keeps catching on your mind throughout the day. Washing dishes, walking, even trying to fall asleep. You find yourself thinking, what is my original face? Not as a philosophy exercise, but as a real, almost intimate puzzle. It becomes less about getting it right, and more about seeing what you are beyond your usual mask. In everyday life, the mind loves to build boxes and put labels on everything. This is good. This is bad. This is me. This is not me. Zen sometimes comes with a hammer and breaks the boxes. Not to leave you lost, but to show you that you've been living in a tiny room with the windows painted shut. When a master answers a spiritual question with something completely ordinary, like, "Have you eaten your rice?" he's opening a window. He remembers a day when he was obsessing about his purpose in life. Big questions, big pressure. He asked a teacher for help, expecting a cosmic speech. The teacher simply asked, "Did you drink water today with awareness?" He almost laughed. It sounded too simple, but driving home, he realized he wanted a huge answer because he was ignoring the small, obvious ways meaning already flowed through his day. Zen's direct pointing is not only in words, it's also in silence and action. Sometimes the master simply raises a finger, closes a door, or gives a shout. To us, that can look rude or theatrical. But inside the tradition, those gestures are meant to hit the student's awareness like a bell. Wake up now, not later, not in theory, not in your next life. Now. The form can be strange, but the message is deeply compassionate. He compares this to a friend grabbing your shoulders when you're about to step into traffic. You might be shocked in the moment, even annoyed, but later you realize that the rude interruption probably saved you. Zen methods can feel like that. They interrupt the comfortable dream, not because your dream is evil, but because you're missing the fresh, living reality happening underneath it. What does all this have to do with lying awake in bed? Quite a lot. At night, your mind is full of silent koans. What if I fail? What if they don't love me? What is going to happen to me? These questions rarely have real answers at 3 a.m., yet the mind keeps chewing them, hoping to find safety. Zen gently suggests that sometimes the only wise response is to step out of the question itself. He began practicing a simple Zen move with his own worries. Instead of answering them, he would sometimes respond with an ordinary, physical action. When his mind screamed, "What is going to happen in 5 years?" he would gently bring attention back to the sensation of his breath, or the weight of his body on the mattress, and quietly ask himself, "What is happening right now?" It wasn't a magic spell, but it was a doorway out of mental labyrinths. He also started treating his own anxious thoughts like tiny koans. When the mind said, "I'm not enough," he didn't try to prove the opposite with a list of achievements. He would sit with the question behind the statement. Who is the I that is not enough? Where is it exactly? Not to bully himself, but to see if that not enough had any real shape outside of thought. Many times, he found only sensations and old stories, not a solid truth. Over time, he realized that Zen pointing is always moving in one direction, away from getting lost in thoughts and toward direct experience. From about to as, from thinking about life to being this breath, this heartbeat, this sound in the dark. The stories still appear, but they lose some of their hypnotic power. It's like watching subtitles at the bottom of the screen instead of believing they are the movie. He's honest. This doesn't mean he now laughs at every worry like a fearless superhero. The mind still loves its dramas, but he has more tools now. If a thought tries to drag him into an endless debate, he can sometimes smile and treat it like a koan that isn't meant to be solved, only seen through. The question becomes a bell, not a prison. Ah, the mind is worrying again. I don't need to fix this thought. I can return to the texture of the pillow, the rhythm of the breath. Oh, ChatGPT, Disa. You know that strange feeling that hits you late at night? Your life isn't exactly a disaster, but it isn't exactly peaceful either. You've got responsibilities, notifications, people who need you, a mind that never shuts up, and deep down, a quiet voice keeps whispering, Is this really how it has to be? They told you peace would come after you fixed everything outside, after the right job, the right relationship, the right number in your bank account. But here you are, fixing one thing after another, and your mind still feels like a crowded room. What if the problem isn't you, but the way you were taught to look for peace in all the wrong places? Tonight, you're not going to hear motivational phrases or fluffy quotes to post and forget. You're going to walk into a different kind of temple, one built not of stone, but of stories. Stories so simple, they sound like fairy tales, and so sharp they cut right through your excuses. For the next 3 hours, you'll sit side by side with monks, merchants, kings, beggars, and even criminals. Not as distant characters from another era, but as mirrors of your own life. The overthinking, the anxiety, the impatience, the emptiness that nothing preempts. It's all there, translated into images your heart understands better than any lecture. Here's the controversial part. You don't need to become spiritual to change your life. You don't need to move to a monastery, shave your head, or renounce everything you love. You just need to learn how to see your own mind differently. And these ancient Zen stories were created exactly for that. Already tonight, you'll be able to try tiny practices that calm your thoughts in under 1 minute. Breaths that pull you out of the burning house of anxiety. Questions that cut through obsession and bring you back to what really matters. Shifts so small they look harmless, but they quietly begin rewriting the way you relate to every problem. Some of what you'll hear will sound like a paradox. You'll discover why trying too hard often blocks your own peace. Why letting go doesn't make you weak. It finally stops you from poisoning yourself. Why the feelings you fight most may be the doorway you've been avoiding your whole life. So, find your most comfortable position. If you want, close your eyes and let the room fade away a little. This is not just a video playing in the background. This is a long, gentle conversation between your restless mind and the part of you that's been wise all along, just waiting for a quiet night like this to finally be heard. There's a person sitting in their living room right now, phone in hand, feeling kind of fine and kind of dying inside at the same time. On paper, their life looks okay. A job, some bills paid, a little free time on weekends. But if anyone could see behind the scenes, they'd notice something strange. Everything around them is slightly on fire. Deadlines burning, relationships burning, sleep burning, health burning. It's like they're calmly sipping coffee in the middle of a house that's quietly collapsing, pretending it's just a busy phase that will magically fix itself. This person doesn't wake up thinking, I'm living in a burning house. They wake up thinking, I'm late. Before they even taste water, they taste anxiety. The first touch of the day is not their own body. It's the phone screen. Notifications hit like sparks. Messages, emails, news, drama, someone complaining in a group chat. Their nervous system goes from 0 to 100 before the sun has fully risen. The worst part, they call this madness, normal life. If someone paused that moment and gently asked, "Are you okay? Really?" they'd probably laugh it off. "Yeah, just tired," they'd say, like everyone else. Tired has become the polite mask we put over the words overwhelmed, anxious, and lost. They've been tired for months, sometimes for years. But they've made peace with the idea that life is supposed to feel like this. They don't even notice how loud their inner fire alarm has been screaming. In the old Buddhist image, children kept playing inside a house that was literally on fire. They weren't stupid. They were hypnotized. The toys held their full attention, just like our modern toys hold ours. The notification bubble, the promotion, the new follower, the new crush. The father shouted, "Get out!" But that didn't work, because fear alone rarely changes anyone. So he did something wiser. He spoke the language of their desire to pull them toward safety. Today, the toys are more polished, but the dynamic is the same. People drown themselves in work, scrolling, shopping, online arguments, and even spiritual content, hoping something will numb the burn inside. They refresh the same 3 apps like they're pulling a slot machine, waiting for a hit of validation. For a moment, it works. Then it fades, and the heat returns. The house keeps burning while they move furniture around and call it being productive. You can spot the burning house in the little details. In the way this person eats in a hurry, standing up, not even tasting the food. In the way they answer, "I'm fine," but their jaw is clenched and their shoulders are permanently raised. In the way they go to bed exhausted and still can't sleep, because the brain finally found silence outside and decided to scream on the inside. The fire isn't dramatic. It's subtle, constant, and familiar. When someone lives like that for too long, they start believing that rest is suspicious. If they sit still, guilt creeps in. If they close their eyes, the to-do list attacks. They might even joke, "If I stop, everything falls apart." But deep down, it doesn't feel like a joke. It feels like a threat. So they keep running inside the same burning rooms, hoping the next achievement will act like a fire extinguisher. Maybe you recognize yourself here in small things, that just one more episode at 2 a.m., even though you promised you'd sleep early. That yes, you said to a favor you didn't have energy for, just to avoid disappointing someone. That strange emptiness that appears after a very productive day, when no amount of crossed-off tasks brings peace. These are small pieces of charcoal on the floor, clues that the house is not as safe as it looks. A practical way to start seeing the flames is surprisingly simple. Once a day, set a tiny reminder on your phone with one question. Where is my house burning right now? When it pops up, don't overthink. Just notice. Maybe it's your health you've been ignoring. Maybe it's a relationship that's all tension and no truth. Maybe it's your own mind, which you never give 5 quiet minutes. Awareness is the first door that opens out of the smoke. Of course, awareness can be uncomfortable. When someone finally sees the mess they're in, the first urge is to fix everything in 1 week. New diet, new job, new habits, new relationship, new personality, all starting Monday. That's just another fire disguised as a rescue plan. The mind wants speed, wisdom wants honesty, and small, consistent moves. You don't rebuild a house in 1 day, and you don't cool down a burned-out life with one magical decision. Sometimes the burning house isn't dramatic from the outside at all. It can look like a perfect Instagram grid, a calm family photo, a job with benefits, and a body that appears healthy. Inside, though, there's a constant sense of rushing and never arriving. It's like living in an airport, always waiting to board the flight to the real life that never actually takes off. No wonder peace feels so far away. It's always in the next terminal. There is also a quiet shame that comes with this. People look around and think, everyone else seems to handle it. Why can't I? They compare their behind-the-scenes chaos with other people's highlight reels. They assume others were born with some manual for life that they somehow missed. This belief keeps them trapped, because instead of asking for help, they double down on pretending. The burning house continues, but now in silence. What complicates everything is that the fire is not just outside, It's also inside. Thoughts like, I'm not enough, I'm too late, I ruined everything, act like gasoline on the flames. Even when the external situation is calm for 5 minutes, the inner critic lights a match. The nervous system has forgotten what safety feels like, so it treats calm moments as suspicious, like the calm before an imagined storm. A simple experiment can start to change that. Choose one ordinary moment tomorrow. Brushing your teeth, washing a cup, taking a shower, and decide, for these 60 seconds, I leave the burning house. That means no phone, no rushing, no multitasking. Just feel the water, the smell of the soap, the movement of your hands. It seems small, almost silly, but it's you practicing walking out the door, even while the rest of the house still burns. Over time, a person who does this starts noticing something interesting. The fire loses a bit of its power when it's seen. When they say, okay, my job is burning, my sleep is burning, my boundaries are burning, it hurts, but it's real. And reality, even when painful, is cooler than pretending. From that cooler place, choices become a little clearer. What to say no to, what to change slowly, what to stop feeding with attention. The old story talks about the father using toy carts to lure the children outside. In modern life, the cart might be something like more energy to play with your kids, a quieter mind to actually enjoy a day off, or simply the ability to sleep without needing to exhaust yourself first. These are not selfish goals, they're survival tools. When someone finally tastes even a few minutes of real peace, they realize how hot the fire had been all along. And here's where a deeper question begins to rise, almost by itself. If my house is burning and I've been pretending it's fine, what else in my life have I been misreading? What if the problem is not just the fire, but the way my mind perceives the wind, the noise, the people, the delays? That's when another kind of wisdom quietly knocks on the door, ready to talk about patience, flexibility, and a very old friend from Zen tradition, the bamboo. He notices something curious. The more the world speeds up, the more his patience shrinks. A slow elevator, a long line at the market, a message that takes 5 minutes to get a reply. Each tiny delay feels like an insult. On the outside, it's just normal life happening. On the inside, it's a storm. His chest tightens, his jaw locks, and his thoughts turn the smallest inconvenience into a personal attack. It's not the traffic that exhausts him, it's the resistance. He doesn't call it anger, of course. He calls it, I'm just stressed, or people are so annoying. In his mind, peace will finally arrive when everything outside cooperates. When co-workers become efficient, relatives become quiet, drivers learn how to drive, and the Wi-Fi never drops. Until then, he gives himself permission to be irritated. In his secret script, the world must behave first, so he can relax later. Later never comes. One day, he hears a strange story about a monk who couldn't meditate because of bamboo. The wind was howling, the stalks were creaking, the leaves were rustling like someone shaking a huge bag of chips right next to his ear. He tried to fight the sound, tried to force the world to be quiet. The more he resisted, the louder everything seemed. His meditation posture was perfect. His mind, though, was a battlefield. Next to him, another monk sat in the exact same storm, with the exact same noise, in the exact same grove. Yet this second monk was at peace. The bamboo for him wasn't an enemy. It was music. Where one heard disturbance, the other heard rhythm. Same sound, different relationship. That's when the real teaching hits. It's not always the world that has to calm down. Sometimes it's the listener. He starts to see how often he gives his power away to noise. A neighbor's dog barks. And suddenly, his mood belongs to the dog. A coworker sends a blunt email, and his entire afternoon belongs to that sentence. The universe doesn't even know he exists, but he behaves like it's attacking him personally. It's exhausting to live like the most important person in a movie where everything that happens is either for or against him. What if patience isn't about waiting for the world to change, but about changing how he meets the world? Bamboo doesn't negotiate with the wind. It doesn't say, "Can you blow less at 6 p.m.? I'm tired." It bends. It sways. It moves with what it can't control. That's not weakness. That's survival wisdom. A rigid tree snaps in the storm. The flexible one looks ridiculous for a moment, then remains standing. He might think, "Okay, nice metaphor, but what do I do when someone is truly unbearable?" That's where the practice gets real. Instead of, "Why is this person like this?" he experiments with, "How can I bend in this moment without breaking myself?" Sometimes bending means taking a slow breath before answering. Sometimes it means walking away instead of entering a useless argument. Sometimes it means silently lowering expectations that were never realistic in the first place. A simple exercise. For 1 week, he chooses one trigger: the slow driver, the loud coworker, the relative who repeats the same story, and turns them into his bamboo teacher. Every time the trigger appears, it's a bell. Instead of exploding, he treats it like a training session. 3 breaths. Relax the shoulders. Notice the urge to react, like a wave rising and falling. He doesn't need to pretend to like it. He just needs to stop letting it own him. Modern life is basically a bamboo storm. Notifications, opinions, news, delays, all blowing at once. If he waits for perfect conditions to be calm, he'll die waiting. The truth is uncomfortable but simple. Peace that depends on everyone else being different is not peace. It's a fantasy. Inner freedom starts the day he admits, "I can't control the wind, but I can learn how to move." There's also a hidden pride in being constantly irritated. It feels secretly powerful to say, "Everyone is incompetent," or "Nobody knows what they're doing." But this attitude makes him the prisoner, not the king. Every time he thinks, "They're ruining my day," he signs a contract. "I give you full control over my inner weather." Bending like bamboo is not about giving others a pass. It's about taking his power back. He starts experimenting in small, safe places, stuck in traffic. Instead of rehearsing imaginary arguments, he uses the red lights as a mini meditation. Hands on the wheel, deep breath in, longer breath out. In line at the supermarket, he deliberately doesn't grab the phone. He notices colors, faces, smells, sounds. Life becomes slightly less of an attack and slightly more of a movie he's watching with curiosity. Of course, he still snaps sometimes. He still loses his temper, still says things he regrets, still wants the world to behave according to his script. Bamboo doesn't become flexible in one windy afternoon. It grows that way, season after season. So instead of hating himself for each relapse, he uses them as proof that the practice is needed. Okay, I broke here. What could bending have looked like instead? That question alone is already growth. Something unexpected happens when he practices this more often. He notices that people around him start changing, but they're mostly the same. What changed was his grip. The co-worker's slow pace becomes a chance to breathe instead of a personal insult. The partner's bad mood becomes a weather pattern rather than an attack on his worth. Even the sound of the neighbor's TV becomes background instead of a war. Patience, he realizes, isn't passive. It's an active choice to stay rooted in what matters while everything else moves. The bamboo stays connected to the earth while dancing with the wind. In human terms, that might mean staying rooted in values, kindness, clarity, self-respect, while external situations swirl and push. It's not about becoming a doormat. It's about learning when to be soft and when to be firm without losing the center. At some point, he catches himself reacting differently to an old trigger. Someone cuts in front of him in traffic, and instead of hot rage, there's a short sigh, and then nothing. The irritation rises and falls like a wave that doesn't hit the shore as hard. In that small moment, he tastes a kind of freedom he'd been chasing with much bigger things: money, status, praise. Who knew peace could hide inside something as simple as not screaming in the car? As this flexibility grows, a new question appears on the horizon. If his relationship with noise and chaos can change so much, what else might he be misunderstanding about his search for peace? Maybe the problem isn't only how he reacts to life's storms, but the way he keeps chasing something far away, as if contentment were always somewhere else. That's when a very different story starts knocking at the door. A farmer, an ox, and a search that led nowhere. He reaches a season in life where, if he's honest, he's tried almost everything. New jobs, new relationships, new cities, new routines. Each new start worked like a fresh coat of paint on a cracked wall. For a while, the colors looked brighter, the mood felt lighter, and he could almost believe that this time, finally, he had found the missing piece. But slowly, quietly, the same old emptiness crept back in, like water leaking through the same invisible crack. One day, he hears the story of a man who lost his beloved ox. This wasn't just an animal. It was his companion, his strength, his support. The farmer panicked, just like modern people panic when their support disappears. A relationship, a job, a role, an identity. He ran through fields, climbed hills, crossed rivers, following tracks with bleeding feet, absolutely sure that his life couldn't make sense until the ox was back. From the outside, people say, "You're doing well." Inside, he feels like a farmer who lost something precious he can't even name. So he searches. He searches in courses, in books, in YouTube videos, in other people. He searches in online shopping carts, in dating apps, in productivity hacks. Always the same silent hope. Maybe this will finally complete me. And when it doesn't, he doesn't stop searching. He just switches targets. The irony is brutal and familiar. The more desperately the farmer searched, the more exhausted and hopeless he became. That's exactly what happens when someone decides, "I'll finally be happy when," and attaches their peace to the next achievement, the next phone, the next trip, the next version of themselves. They live like a dog chasing its own tail, sincere effort, zero progress, and a lot of dizziness. When the farmer finally finds the ox, he expects some dramatic revelation. But the animal is simply there, calm, unchanged. Not nearly as desperate as the man who was searching. The ox hadn't been screaming, "You lost me!" That panic existed only inside the farmer's mind. In the same way, our sense of something missing often lives more in the story we tell ourselves than in reality itself. Modern psychology has a boring name for this: the hedonic treadmill. You run and run, but stay in the same emotional place. Promotion, plateau, boredom, new relationship, honeymoon, routine, new phone, dopamine, dust. It's not that pleasure is bad. It's that when someone uses it to fix an inner hole, the effect never lasts. The brain gets used to every wow and quietly demands next. At some point, he notices a pattern. Every big goal he once swore would change everything eventually turns into normal. The dream job becomes just work. The dream partner becomes just a person with quirks. The dream city becomes just traffic and bills in a different place. The constant is not the job, the partner, or the city. The constant is the restless mind that keeps saying, "Not enough, not yet." The old master in the story doesn't tell the young monk to stop searching because searching is evil. He just gently points out that the energy of desperate seeking is the very thing blinding him. It's like trying to clear muddy water by shaking it harder. The more he fights, the cloudier it gets. The ox, his true nature, his basic inner peace, was never really gone. It was just covered by dust. A very practical experiment emerges from this. Before starting any self-improvement mission, the new diet, the new routine, the new habit, he takes 60 seconds to do the opposite of seeking. He sits, feels his breath, and doesn't try to change anything. He doesn't chase a mystical state. He simply notices, "I'm breathing. I'm here. This moment exists even if I do nothing to improve it." For many people, that is already a wild idea. At first, it feels pointless. How can doing nothing help? I have real problems. But slowly, something subtle shifts. Those 60 seconds become a small home base, a place inside that is not tied to notifications, to other people's approval, or to the number of tasks completed. Like the farmer resting in the grass next to his ox, he discovers a peace that doesn't depend on the next big thing. This doesn't mean he stops having goals or dreams. It means he stops treating them as oxygen. He can want a better job without believing he's worthless until he gets it. He can want a relationship without acting like being single is a disease. He can want more money without turning every waking moment into a hunger game. Goals become directions, not bandages on an imaginary wound. One simple question becomes a compass. Am I searching from lack or moving from fullness? When he acts from lack, there's always tension, comparison, urgency, and fear of missing out. When he moves from fullness, from the sense that he's already fundamentally enough, the same actions feel different. He can study, work, and improve, but without that heavy background noise of, "If this doesn't work, I'm nothing." Over time, he starts seeing how many sales pitches, ads, and even spiritual messages are built on the same hidden promise. You're incomplete, but we can fix you. And instead of swallowing that whole, he begins to smile. Not a cynical smile, but a knowing one. Like someone who finally realizes the treasure chest they were trying to buy was already sitting in their attic the whole time. There's a quiet kind of power in no longer being desperate. People feel it. Conversations become lighter because he no longer needs to prove anything. Work becomes cleaner because he's not trying to squeeze his entire worth out of every project. Free time becomes truly free because it's not just recovery from being drained, but a space where he can simply exist, like the farmer resting his head on the ox and watching the sky. And yet, as he relaxes a little, something surprising happens. Old emotions that he had been outrunning start to appear. Anger, sadness, jealousy, fear. They rise like bubbles in water that's finally becoming still. That's when he understands a strange truth. Finding the ox was never the end of the journey. Now he has to learn how to sit by the inner mirror and watch everything that appears in it, without running away again. He reaches a point where he's less busy on the outside, but more noisy on the inside. Even when nothing bad is happening, his mind keeps replaying arguments, imagining future disasters, or comparing himself to people he's never even met. He thinks, if I meditate more, maybe these feelings will disappear. So he sits, closes his eyes, and suddenly becomes painfully aware of everything he was trying not to feel. At first, he assumes this means he's doing it wrong. If I were truly peaceful, he thinks, I wouldn't feel anger, jealousy, or insecurity. He confuses spiritual practice with emotional anesthesia. Every time a difficult feeling appears, he treats it like a personal failure, like a stain on his enlightened image. It's exhausting to fight a war on two fronts, against the world and against his own heart. Then he hears the story of the monk by the mountain pool. The Buddha doesn't give a complicated lecture. He points to water. Look, he says, the pool is clear, calm, mirror-like. The monk sees himself easily. Then Buddha tells him, now stir it. The monk obeys, and the reflection vanishes into chaos. The more he agitates the water, the less he can see. That's exactly what he's been doing with his emotions. Every time anger appears, he attacks himself for feeling it. Every time sadness appears, he tries to drown it in distractions. Every time jealousy appears, he covers it with fake positivity. In other words, he keeps stirring the water, desperate to erase what the surface is showing. And then he wonders why nothing ever feels truly clear. At some point, he tests a very uncomfortable experiment. He lets an emotion exist without immediately reacting to it. Not forever, just for a few breaths. Anger shows up. He notices the heat, the tight jaw, the urge to slam a door, and doesn't move. Fear shows up. He feels the knot in his stomach, the shallow breathing, and just watches. It feels strange at first, almost like sitting still in front of a barking dog. The fascinating part is what happens next. Just like the stirred water, the emotion starts to shift on its own. The peak intensity doesn't last. Anger turns into hurt. Hurt turns into sadness. Sadness turns into a quiet heaviness. And then, if he keeps watching, that heaviness also changes. The monster he was running from is revealed to be something far more fragile. A temporary wave in a much larger ocean. A practical way to train this is ridiculously simple, but not easy. Whenever a strong emotion appears, he silently names it like a weather report. Anger is here, fear is here, shame is here. Not I am anger, but anger is here in my field. That tiny shift in language creates a tiny bit of space. In that space, he can breathe. In that space, he's not just the storm. He's also the sky watching the storm pass. He starts noticing how much of his suffering didn't come from the first feeling, but from the second reaction. He felt sadness, first wave, then immediately judged himself for being weak, second wave, then felt shame for judging himself, third wave, and suddenly he was drowning. If he had let the first wave just rise and fall, the experience would have still been intense, but far less torturing. Think about how people usually deal with emotions. One friend drinks them away, another scrolls them away, another works them away, another spiritualizes them away with phrases like, everything happens for a reason, while their chest is on fire. None of these strategies are evil, they're just noisy. They keep the water constantly stirred, so the person never actually sees what's going on under the surface. One day, after a rough conversation, he decides to do something different. Instead of immediately distracting himself, he sets a 5-minute timer. He sits on the bed, closes his eyes, and simply witnesses the chaos. the speeding thoughts, the hurt phrases, the physical ache. He doesn't add stories like, "I'm always like this," or "they're horrible." 5 minutes is long enough to prove a quiet truth. Even the strongest emotion has a rhythm. It comes, peaks, and shifts. This doesn't mean he becomes a passive doormat. Observing emotions doesn't erase the need for boundaries or decisions. It just makes those decisions wiser. It's one thing to set a boundary while in the middle of a volcanic eruption, and another to set it after the lava has cooled. The words are different, the tone is different, and the outcome is usually much healthier. Over time, the mirror practice makes him more honest with himself. Instead of saying, "I'm fine," while boiling inside, he can say, "I'm actually really angry right now," without falling apart. Instead of pretending not to care, he can admit, "That hurt me more than I expected." This honesty is not weakness. It's like cleaning a dirty mirror. The clearer it gets, the more accurately he can navigate his life. He also starts to see how much compassion is born from this clarity. When he watches his own anger from the inside, he realizes how often anger is just pain wearing armor. When he watches his own jealousy, he discovers unmet needs and old wounds. Suddenly, other people's explosions look less like pure evil and more like their own stirred-up pools. He doesn't have to accept their behavior, but he understands the mechanism. A simple, concrete exercise grows out of this. Once a day, he picks one small emotional moment to witness fully. It doesn't have to be a big drama. It can be the irritation when someone cuts him off in traffic, the disappointment when a message is left on read, or the sadness of remembering someone who's no longer around. For 60 seconds, he doesn't fix, avoid, or explain it. He just lets the water settle and sees what remains. Little by little, he realizes something shocking. The emotions were never the real enemy. The war he was fighting wasn't him versus anger or him versus sadness. It was him versus his own resistance. The more he tried to force the pool to be clear, the cloudier it got. When he finally allowed the mud to sink naturally, a deeper stillness started to appear underneath everything. And once he tastes that stillness, even for a few breaths, it changes his relationship with every future storm. He knows, this won't last. I don't need to panic every time a feeling arrives. I can watch the surface move, knowing there's depth beneath it. That quiet confidence isn't loud or dramatic, but it's powerful. It's the beginning of real emotional freedom. Of course, a new challenge slowly appears. If peace isn't about eliminating emotions, and if the inner mirror can show things clearly, what about the pleasures he's been chasing? The little honeys of life that feel so sweet, but somehow leave him emptier afterward. That's when another story comes to visit him. A hunter, a deer, and a sweetness that hides a very quiet poison. Oh, ChatGPT dice, he notices that some of the things that feel good always come with a little hangover. Not necessarily alcohol, but that subtle emptiness after scrolling too long, eating too much, flirting for validation, or buying something he doesn't need. In the moment, it's sweet. Afterward, it's strangely bitter. It's like drinking from a beautiful glass and realizing the water doesn't really quench his thirst. At first, he thinks the solution is obvious. Get more of the sweet part and somehow avoid the bitter side. More delicious food but without guilt. More admiration but without insecurity. More comfort but without laziness. He doesn't see that the problem isn't the sweetness itself, but the way he clings to it. He doesn't enjoy, he grabs, and what we grab always ends up grabbing us back. Then he hears that story about the hunter and the deer. The hunter doesn't chase with violence. He uses honey. The leaf looks innocent. The smell is irresistible. The taste is perfect. The trap is not the sweetness. It's the poison that comes hidden inside. The deer tastes a little, then a little more, then stops thinking. Desire takes the steering wheel. By the time the danger appears, it's too late. He recognizes himself in that deer more than he'd like to admit. How many times did he say, "Just one more episode, just one more slice, just one more message," and then look at the clock in disbelief? In those moments, he wasn't choosing. He was being pulled. The honey was different each time, but the pattern was the same. Short, intense pleasure followed by a long, dull dissatisfaction. What makes it more confusing is that the pleasures themselves are often harmless. There's nothing wrong with a good dessert, a fun night out, a nice purchase, a series he enjoys. The issue starts when he secretly believes, "This is what will make my life okay." Then he needs it. He depends on it. If the honey isn't available, he feels panic, boredom, or a sense that life has no color. He starts to play detective with his own habits. After the next big indulgence, food, shopping, binge-watching, he doesn't judge himself. He simply observes, like a scientist. How do I feel 10 minutes after? 1 hour after? The next day? This honest check-in already begins to break the spell. The honey loses a bit of its illusion when he connects it with the full experience, not just the first bite. A very practical exercise emerges. Before he reaches for the sweet thing, he pauses for 5 seconds and asks, "Am I hungry or just restless? Am I lonely or just scrolling away discomfort? Am I tired or just looking for stimulation?" He can still say yes to the pleasure. The difference is that now he knows why he's doing it. Conscious indulgence is very different from compulsive escape. He learns that enjoyment and attachment are cousins, but not twins. Enjoyment says, "This is nice while it lasts." Attachment says, "This has to last, or I'll fall apart." One is like watching a sunset. The other is like trying to grab the sun and take it home in a plastic bag. The more he tries to hold on, the more desperate and anxious he feels. Slowly, he experiments with mindful pleasure. If he's going to eat chocolate, he actually eats it, not inhale it while staring at his phone. If he's going to watch a show, he chooses one episode and savors it, instead of auto-playing until his brain feels fried. If he's with someone he loves, he tries to be there, not half in, half texting. It sounds simple, but the impact is huge. He also notices that some of the sweetest honeys are invisible from the outside. The pleasure of being right in an argument, the pleasure of gossiping, the pleasure of being admired, the pleasure of having the last word. These don't come in jars, but they are just as addictive. And just like the poisoned leaf, they can quietly damage relationships, self-respect, and inner peace. From time to time, he runs a bold test. He picks one of his regular honeys and takes a short break from it. Not forever, just a week. No sugar in coffee. No social media after 9 p.m. No checking messages during meals. During that week, he watches what happens inside. The restlessness, the urges, the excuses. He discovers that the real detox isn't from sugar or screens, it's from dependence. He realizes something deeper too. Often, the thing he thinks he wants is just a doorway to a feeling he truly craves. The dessert is a doorway to comfort. The shopping is a doorway to feeling worthy. The attention is a doorway to feeling seen. If he goes directly to those deeper needs, comfort, worth, being seen, the honey loses some of its power. A sincere conversation, a walk in nature, a journal page can sometimes satisfy more than the treat. As this awareness grows, he doesn't become a monk who hates pleasure. Quite the opposite. He starts to genuinely enjoy simple things with more intensity. The taste of plain fruit, the warmth of a shower, the feel of his bed after a long day. Without the constant chase for stronger stimulation, his sensitivity slowly returns. What was boring before becomes quietly beautiful. Still, one fear lingers. If attachment to pleasure can poison me, maybe I should just cut everything enjoyable out of my life. That's the mind's usual pendulum. If one extreme doesn't work, run to the other. And sure enough, the next story on his path isn't about a deer or honey. It's about a monk who tried to starve his body to feed his spirit, and almost lost both in the process. Oh, ChatGPT dice. He reaches a stage where his search for growth becomes secretly cruel. On paper, he looks disciplined, wakes up early, pushes his body, hustles, cuts pleasures, cuts rest. People say, "Wow, you're so committed." But inside, something is off. He's tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix, irritated with everyone, and strangely proud of how much he can endure. It feels less like self-care and more like self-punishment, with a motivational quote on top. He starts to believe a dangerous equation: more suffering, more progress. If the diet hurts, it must be working. If the workout destroys him, it must be good. If he's always exhausted, he must be doing something important. He doesn't notice that his spiritual and emotional life is shrinking while his grind identity grows. The body is begging for kindness. The mind is begging for silence. He replies with, "Stop complaining. We're leveling up." Then he hears about the monk who tried to reach enlightenment by starving himself, sleeping on stone, barely eating, pushing his body until it was skin and bone. People called him admirable, but if you really looked into his eyes, you'd see something empty. Not the emptiness of peace, but the emptiness of someone who's burning the house down to stay warm. He confuses destruction with devotion. One day, a child looks at him and asks the simplest question, "Have you eaten?" That cuts deeper than any spiritual teaching, because kids don't care about your image. They feel your reality. The monk realizes that somewhere on the path, he lost basic compassion for himself. He was treating his body like an enemy to be defeated instead of an ally to be cared for. Modern science backs this up in a non-romantic way. When someone is chronically sleep-deprived, underfed and stressed, their brain literally goes into survival mode. Creativity drops, empathy drops, patience vanishes. The very qualities needed for deep spiritual insight, clarity, gentleness, presence, are the first to disappear when the body is at war with itself. It's hard to hear inner wisdom over the sound of constant alarm bells. He starts to see how this plays out in everyday life. The person who never rests and only feels valuable when productive. The one who brags about how little they eat, how much they work, how busy they are. The one who says, "I'll relax when I deserve it," as if rest were a trophy, not a basic need. On the outside, it looks impressive. On the inside, it's a slow, quiet collapse. A very uncomfortable question appears. If I treated a friend the way I treat myself, would that be love or abuse? If he made a friend work when they were exhausted, called them lazy when they needed rest, criticized their body relentlessly, denied them joy for their own good, what kind of friend would that be? Yet this is how many people motivate themselves every day. He begins experimenting with a different lens. Instead of asking, "Does this make me stronger?" he also asks, Does this make me kinder toward myself and others? Because strength without kindness curdles into arrogance or bitterness. Discipline without compassion turns into spiritual pride. I suffer more than you, so I'm better than you. That's not awakening. That's just ego in gym clothes. A simple, practical shift starts small. Eating when hungry, not when the schedule says, resting when tired, without labeling it weakness, saying no to one extra demand per week to protect sanity. Not huge changes, just tiny acts of basic respect. And suddenly, his meditation deepens, his patience returns, and his interactions soften. It's as if feeding the body opens a door for the heart. He realizes that sacrifice is powerful, but only when it's guided by wisdom, not by self-hatred. Fasting, for example, can be a beautiful practice if it's done with awareness and balance. But using hunger to punish yourself for not being enough is a completely different thing. The same behavior from the outside can be healing or harmful depending on the energy behind it. So he starts asking, before any hard choice, am I doing this from love or from fear, from respect or from shame? Running 10 kilometers can be love if it nourishes his spirit. It can be punishment if he's doing it because he secretly despises his own body. Working late can be generosity if it's a conscious choice. It can be self-abandonment if he's doing it because he's terrified of being seen as lazy. Over time, something almost paradoxical happens. As he treats himself with more balance, eating decently, sleeping adequately, resting without guilt, his capacity to serve others actually increases. His presence becomes warmer, less brittle. People feel safer around him because he's no longer carrying that harsh inner judge that used to spill out in subtle ways. The middle way makes him more human, not less. He also learns that self-compassion doesn't mean self-indulgence. It's not about doing whatever feels good in the moment. Sometimes, being kind to himself means saying, no, we're not escaping into the phone right now. We're going to sit with this discomfort. Or, we will finish this responsibility, and then we'll rest. It's like being a wise parent to his own inner child, firm but gentle. A helpful exercise emerges for him. Once a day, he asks, if my body could vote today, what would it ask for? If my heart could vote, what would it ask for? Maybe the body wants water instead of another coffee. Maybe the heart wants a real conversation instead of another video. He doesn't always give them exactly what they want, but he listens. That listening alone begins to heal something deep. Little by little, he sees that real spirituality isn't about escaping his humanity, it's about embracing it wisely. The body isn't a prison to escape or a machine to exploit. It's a temple to care for. The mind isn't an enemy to crush, but a wild animal to train with patience. The heart isn't a weakness. It's where the most powerful courage is born. And as this balance grows, a new kind of question appears on his horizon. If I stop punishing myself and start caring for myself, what do I do with all this new energy? Energy that used to be wasted on self-attack is now available for something bigger. That's when another story begins to whisper to him about a king, a beggar, and a kind of generosity that doesn't just cost comfort, it offers everything. He reaches a phase where having more stops impressing him as much as it used to. He's seen people with big houses and small hearts, people with full bank accounts and empty evenings, people with phones full of contacts but nobody to call when they're really breaking inside. Deep down, he starts sensing that the real wealth isn't what he can stack in his closet, but what flows through him when he helps someone breathe easier. He remembers moments when he gave something simple, a ride, a patient ear, a small loan, and felt more alive than after any shopping spree. There was a warmth in the chest, a kind of inner light that stayed long after the act itself. It wasn't about being a hero, it was about seeing someone else's burden get a little lighter. In those moments, he wasn't thinking about himself, and paradoxically, he felt more himself than ever. Then he hears the story of the king who gave everything away. Food, shelter, medicine, day after day, to anyone who asked. People said, he's going to end up with nothing. But somehow, his sense of purpose grew richer with each gift. The treasury emptied and refilled, but his heart stayed full. It's strange how the math of the soul works. The more he gave, the less he lacked. One day, a beggar in disguise pushes the king to the limit. If your generosity is real, give me your life. This isn't a motivational poster anymore. This is the line where talk usually stops. Most people would negotiate, argue, or get offended. The king doesn't flinch. For him, his life already belongs to something bigger than his personal comfort. If his death could truly serve others, then holding on would feel like stealing. In modern life, very few people will be asked to literally give their life. But every day, they're invited to give pieces of it. Time, attention, energy, patience. Those are tiny slices of life. When he stays an extra 10 minutes listening to a friend, instead of rushing to his phone, that's a small sacrifice. When he helps someone who can't pay him back, that's a quiet version of the king's choice. He notices that some of his most painful moments come from the opposite movement. Grabbing instead of giving. Grabbing credit. Grabbing control. Grabbing the last word in an argument. It feels powerful for 5 seconds and then strangely hollow. It's like eating salt when he's thirsty. His mouth is busy, but his throat burns. The more he grabs, the more he feels he doesn't have enough. So he starts testing a new rule. Where can I give just a little instead of take? Not in dramatic ways, but in small daily choices. Letting someone merge in traffic, sharing knowledge without needing applause, doing a task at home without announcing it on a loudspeaker. At first, the ego complains, and who sees that? Over time, a different voice answers, you do, and that's enough. He realizes that true generosity is less about quantity and more about cost. A billionaire giving $1,000 might feel less inside than a worker giving 10. A busy parent giving 5 minutes of deep presence might be offering more than an influencer giving an hour of distracted attention. The real measure is, does this gift touch my comfort zone? If it does, that's where the heart grows. To train this, he chooses one generosity muscle to work each week. 1 week, it's money, buying lunch for someone who can't repay. The next, it's time, visiting a lonely relative or calling a friend who's struggling. Another week, it's emotional generosity, genuinely celebrating someone else's win without comparing. This turns generosity into a living practice, not just a nice idea. An unexpected side effect appears. The more he gives from the heart, the less obsessed he becomes with how people see him. The king in the story didn't give to build a brand or to trend in the palace hashtag. He gave because that was who he had become. In the same way, our character is what we do when nobody is watching. And strangely, that invisible part is what makes us sleep well at night. He also starts to understand that generosity isn't always nice. Sometimes, the most generous thing he can do is tell someone a difficult truth, or refuse to enable a harmful pattern. Saying no to a destructive request can be an act of love. The king was willing to give his life, not his integrity. Real compassion doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It means saying yes to what truly serves growth. Modern research calls it helper's high, when giving lights up the reward centers of the brain. But what ancient stories already knew is that helping aligns a person with the feeling of purpose. For a moment, he's not just a separate little self trying to survive. He's part of a bigger movement of care that existed long before him and will continue long after. That sense of belonging is a kind of inner wealth no recession can touch. Of course, he notices a trap here, too. The ego can hijack generosity and turn it into a stage. Look how humble I am. Look how much I sacrifice. When giving becomes a way to feel superior, the sweetness turns sour again. So he quietly checks his motives. Am I giving to be seen, or am I giving because this is the most loving thing to do? If it's the first, he smiles, adjusts, and tries again. A grounding exercise helps. Once in a while, he gives something and tells absolutely no one. No post, no story, no subtle mention. That secret gift becomes a private pact between his heart and his values. It's like watering roots nobody sees. Strangely, those are the moments he feels closest to the king in the story, and closest to his own best self. As this way of living deepens, he understands that giving is not a side activity. It's one of the main ways he discovers who he really is. The more he shares, the clearer he sees what truly matters to him. And yet, there's still another layer he hasn't faced fully. The generosity of time, of patience, of not forcing his own growth. Because if giving is so powerful, what happens when he gives himself the one thing he's rarely offered? Time to grow at a natural pace. He starts to notice a pattern in his life. Anything worth having takes longer than he wants. Healing takes longer. Learning takes longer. Building something meaningful takes longer. But his mind is wired for instant everything. Same-day delivery, fast internet, quick fixes. So when his inner growth doesn't move at Wi-Fi speed, he quietly wonders, what's wrong with me? As if wisdom should arrive like a notification. He hears the story of the young monk who wanted enlightenment like someone wants a promotion. I've done the practices. I've checked the boxes. Where's my result? Every day he pressed the master for a deadline, like he was tracking an order online. The master didn't argue. He just walked him to a giant tree that had been growing longer than any human lifetime and said, "Look, really, look." At first, the tree seems boring. It just stands there. No fireworks, no epic soundtrack. But the more he observes it, the more he realizes how much history is stored in those rings. Storms survived, winters endured, summers where growth exploded, droughts where life slowed down to the bare minimum. The tree never got a memo saying, "You're behind." It simply responded to each season as honestly as it could. He realizes his own growth has seasons too. There are spring phases when insights bloom one after another, when meditation feels deep and life feels aligned. There are summer phases when he's productive, expressive, strong. Then there are autumn moments of letting go, and winter moments where everything looks dead on the surface, but roots are quietly growing underground. The problem isn't the seasons, it's his impatience with them. He remembers times when he forced himself to grow faster. Read 5 books at once, joined 3 courses, set extreme goals. For a few weeks, it looked impressive. Then came burnout, frustration, and that old feeling of failure. It's like trying to pull on a plant to make it taller. You don't help it, you just rip it from the ground. Some processes only work at the speed of honesty. A practical shift begins when he swaps the question, "How fast am I growing?" for "How deeply am I growing?" Instead of counting how many books he reads, He asks, "Did anything I read change how I act today?" Instead of obsessing over how long he meditated, he asks, "Did I at least show up with sincerity?" Depth doesn't always look impressive on the outside, but it's what keeps the tree standing when storms arrive. He starts to see how this shows up in relationships too. He wants instant trust, instant intimacy, instant healing after arguments. But the tree teaches him that roots between people don't grow on demand. They thicken through repeated moments of honesty, repair after conflict, small acts of care. There's no speed-run version of real connection, no matter what movies or social media suggest. To train this patience, he experiments with small, tangible habits. Learning a new skill, he commits to just 30 minutes a day instead of an intense weekend that burns him out. Working on his inner peace, he chooses consistency, 10 minutes of daily meditation over heroic 1-hour sessions when he has time, which mysteriously never comes. Like watering a tree regularly instead of flooding it once a month. He notices something interesting when he slows down. His awareness sharpens. When he's not rushing his own growth, he has more space to actually feel what's going on. Old patterns surface. Subtle fears become visible. Small joys become louder. It's like walking instead of driving. You see paths, details, and shortcuts that were invisible at high speed. A useful question arises during difficult days. If this is a winter season for me, what would a wise tree do? It wouldn't curse the cold. It wouldn't compare itself to tropical plants on Instagram. It would conserve energy, protect its core, and trust that spring eventually comes. In human terms, that might look like lowering expectations, focusing on basics, and letting go of the idea that life must look amazing all the time. He also realizes that impatience often hides fear. Fear of wasting time. Fear of staying stuck forever. Fear of not keeping up with people his age. The tree has no concept of being late. It's not comparing its height to the pine next to it. It is simply itself, fully. When he remembers that, something inside relaxes. Maybe his timeline doesn't need to match anyone else's to be valid. A practical exercise helps anchor this. Once a week, he writes down 3 small signs of growth that aren't flashy. Today, I paused before reacting. I apologized faster than before. I didn't run away from that uncomfortable conversation. These are like tiny rings in his inner tree. Individually, they look small. Over months and years, they form a trunk no storm can easily break. He starts to notice that when he's kinder to his own pace, he becomes kinder to others' pace too. Instead of judging someone for not getting it, he remembers all the times he needed 10 trying, 20, 50 repetitions before a lesson really landed. Instead of pushing people to change overnight, he offers steady presence. The tree doesn't yell at the saplings around it. It just keeps being a tree. Over time, something beautiful happens. His identity shifts from someone racing toward a finish line to someone growing, ring by ring. There's no magical moment where a voice announces, "Congratulations, you are now officially wise." But there are many quiet moments where he reacts differently than he would have a year ago. These are the real medals, invisible but priceless. And yet, even as he relaxes into this natural pace, another tension remains. If growth takes time, how does he deal with that nagging feeling of missing something? That emptiness that appears even when everything looks okay on the outside? The tree teaches him about time, but another story appears on the path, about a merchant who had everything and nothing at the same time, and how understanding himself changed what wealth really meant. He reaches a point where, from the outside, His life looks like the after photo of every dream board. Good job, nice phone, decent apartment, maybe even a car, weekend plans, people who think he's doing well. If someone judged him only by his Instagram, they'd probably say, "Wow, he made it." But inside, there's this quiet, stubborn emptiness that keeps whispering, "Is this all?" At first, he tries the most common strategy. More purchases, more trips, more food, more parties, more work achievements. Every new win gives him a little high, a rush of, now it'll feel different. And for a day or two, it does. Things look shinier. Life feels louder. Then, like a balloon losing air in slow motion, everything returns to the same flat, emotional baseline. He hears the story of the merchant who could buy almost anything, yet couldn't buy peace. It's disturbingly familiar. The man had warehouses full of wealth and a heart that felt like an empty storage unit. That story isn't about a guy in ancient clothes. It's about anyone who's ever stared at their room full of stuff and thought, "Why do I still feel like something is missing?" When he's honest, he recognizes how often he chases feelings instead of objects. He doesn't really want the new phone. He wants the excitement of opening the box. He doesn't really want the fancy dinner. He wants to feel important, rewarded. He doesn't really want the promotion. He wants to feel worthy. The problem is that when the feeling fades, he blames the thing and goes hunting for a bigger version. Modern psychology calls this the hedonic treadmill, but he doesn't need the term to know the experience. He upgrades something in his life, and for a while, it feels amazing. Then his brain quietly adjusts. Okay, this is normal now. And the old restlessness comes back wearing a new outfit. It's like changing the scenery in a movie, but keeping the same plot. In the story, the merchant asks for 3 wishes. First, he wants to be free from worry. Who wouldn't? That sounds like the ultimate upgrade. But days later, he notices that his mind is still spinning the same old stories. What if I lose this? What if they don't like me? What if it all collapses? The scenery didn't change the script. The external wish didn't rewrite the internal habit. This makes him start to question his own if-only list. If only I made X amount, I'd relax. If only I were in a relationship, I'd feel whole. If only I moved to that city, I'd be happy. The merchant's frustration becomes a mirror. If worry doesn't leave just because circumstances change, maybe the real prison isn't the situation, but the way his mind relates to it. The second wish in the story is even more revealing. The merchant wants to be free of desire. He thinks, if wanting hurts, then I'll just stop wanting. It sounds spiritual, mature, almost enlightened. But of course, it doesn't work. Desire is part of being alive. The problem isn't that he wants, it's that he's convinced he can only be okay after his wants are fulfilled. He starts to see how that trap appears in everyday things. Wanting to rest is natural. Believing he can't feel safe until everything is perfect is suffering. Wanting love is natural. Believing he's nothing without someone else's approval is suffering. Desire is like wind in a sail. It can move his life. Attachment is when he chains himself to a specific wind and refuses to sail if it's not blowing. The third wish changes everything. The merchant asks to understand himself. Not the economy, not the stars, not mysterious powers. Himself. That's when the story shifts from magic fix to real transformation. Because understanding himself means finally turning inward and asking, what am I really looking for beneath all these things I chase? He tries a practical version of that in his own life. The next time he feels the urge to buy something, He pauses and asks, "What do I hope this will make me feel?" Maybe it's confidence, maybe it's belonging, maybe it's relief. Then he asks, "Is there any other way, even a small one, to taste that feeling right now without this purchase?" A walk, a call, a moment of creativity. It's not about never buying. It's about seeing clearly. Slowly, he notices something that both comforts and disturbs him. The peace he keeps chasing. Out there has brief appearances in here when he stops chasing anything. In those random minutes when he's fully present, watching the sky, playing with a kid, laughing with a friend, absorbed in a hobby, he forgets to be incomplete. For a moment, there's no missing piece, no race, just being. That realization shifts the entire question. Instead of, "What do I need to add to my life to feel complete?" he starts asking, "What keeps blocking the completeness that sometimes shows up on its own?" Often it's mental noise, comparison, self-criticism, constant planning, endless replay of old scenes. It's not that peace never existed, it's that it keeps getting drowned. A simple daily exercise helps. For 60 seconds, he does nothing but notice his own awareness. Not his thoughts, not his feelings, just the quiet space that notices everything. He doesn't turn it into a big ritual. He just checks in. Over time, that inner space feels less like an abstract idea and more like a home he can return to anywhere, without tickets or purchases. The more familiar he becomes with that inner home, the less desperate his chasing becomes. He can still enjoy things, good coffee, new clothes, a fun trip, but they're no longer auditions for the role of savior of my life. They're just guests at a party that's already happening, not the party itself. That subtle shift from needing to enjoying changes everything. And yet, he notices a strange resistance to this inner richness. Part of him still clings to the old idea. If I don't keep chasing more, I'll be nobody. That's when another story appears on his path. Not about a rich man missing something, but about someone with almost nothing who discovers he's far richer than he ever imagined. A beggar, a bowl, and a kind of wealth that can't be stored in any bank. He doesn't realize how rich he already is until life forces him to stop and actually look. Most days, he wakes up, grabs the phone, sighs about what he doesn't have yet, and walks past miracles like they were cheap decorations. His eyes see, his legs move, his hands work, his mind thinks, his heart feels. And still he says, "I have nothing." It's not arrogance, it's habit. He's been trained to measure wealth only in numbers and objects, not in abilities and experiences. Then he hears the story of the beggar who approached the Buddha convinced he was the poorest man in the village. No house, no land, no savings, just a worn bowl and tired feet. In his mind, poverty meant having almost nothing tangible. He didn't see that his definition of wealth was so narrow it could barely fit his own life inside it. The Buddha doesn't hand him coins. He hands him a question. Would you sell your eyes for a chest of gold? That simple question lands like a thunderbolt. The beggar instantly refuses. Of course not. Without his eyes, how would he see the faces of people he loves, the colors of the sky, the path in front of him? Suddenly, the math shifts. If he won't trade his eyes for a chest of gold, doesn't that mean his eyes are worth more than a chest of gold? The questions keep coming. Would you trade your hands for a palace? Your legs for a kingdom? Each time, the beggar says no without thinking. He starts feeling something uncomfortable and beautiful at the same time. If he wouldn't exchange his body for unimaginable wealth, then how can he keep saying he has nothing? His poverty wasn't in his reality. It was in his attention. He starts to imagine, what if a billionaire actually offered to buy his eyes? The thought alone feels like a horror movie. No amount of money could make that deal feel right. And yet, every day before this, he woke up with those priceless eyes and saw nothing special about it. The treasure was always there. The gratitude was not. Modern research quietly confirms this. Gratitude exercises, like listing 3 things you're thankful for, aren't just cute. They literally rewire the brain to notice existing abundance. People who practice this regularly report more joy, less anxiety, and stronger relationships. The funny part? Their external life often doesn't change at first. What changes is what their inner camera decides to focus on. He starts doing his own Buddha questions in daily life. Would I trade this right hand for a new car? Would I give my memory away to erase my debts? Would I surrender my ability to love in exchange for permanent fame? The answers are immediate and powerful. No, no, and absolutely not. And with each no, another hidden piece of wealth lights up inside him. He realizes he's been walking through life like someone dying of thirst while standing in a river. The water was all around. The ability to feel, to think, to change, to learn, to start again after mistakes. But because that water was always there, he called it nothing. He wasn't poor. He was blind to his own richness. A simple practice begins when he says, "I have nothing." He forces himself to finish the sentence honestly. I have nothing except my body still working, my mind capable of learning, at least one person who cares, and another chance today. It doesn't magically fix bills or problems, but it stops the lie that his life is completely empty. From that more honest place, action becomes easier. This doesn't mean he denies real hardship. There are people who truly struggle for food, safety, and shelter. Gratitude doesn't erase injustice. But even in the hardest lives, there are often small, stubborn lights that refuse to go out. A laugh, a song, a memory, a helping hand. Seeing those lights isn't pretending everything is okay. It's refusing to let darkness tell the whole story. He also notices how this shift changes the way he sees other people. Before, he'd look at someone poor and only see lack. Old clothes, small house, simple job. Now, he starts to wonder, what treasures is this person carrying that I can't see? Wisdom, resilience, kindness, creativity. Suddenly, he stops confusing net worth with human worth. To train this new vision, he tries a little experiment for 7 days. Each morning, hand on chest, he finds 3 things he wouldn't sell for any amount of money. One might be his child's voice. Another, his sense of humor. Another, his ability to start over after failing. Writing them down feels almost embarrassing at first. Then it becomes a quiet, daily revolution. Over time, something subtle but powerful happens. The emptiness that used to scream, "You're missing something out there," starts to soften. It doesn't disappear completely. He's still human. But now it has to share space with a different feeling. I'm already holding things of unimaginable value. That doesn't make ambition vanish. It simply roots ambition in appreciation instead of desperation. He starts to see that gratitude isn't about pretending life is perfect. It's about refusing to lie to himself about how much good is already present. On a bad day, it might be as simple as, at least I can breathe, at least I can feel, at least I can change my mind. Those sound small until you imagine losing them. And yet, Even as his sense of inner wealth grows, he stumbles into a new trap, believing that because he sees his own richness clearly, his view of reality is finally the correct one. He forgets that other people stand in different spots, with different histories, seeing different parts of the same life. That's when another teaching arrives, about 6 blind men, an elephant, and how even honest perceptions can clash like enemies if they forget they're only touching one part of the truth. He starts to notice how fiercely people defend their opinions, including himself. Politics, spirituality, parenting, money. Everyone speaks as if they've signed a contract with the truth. He remembers all the times he thought, if they just saw what I see, they'd agree with me. Underneath that sentence, there's a hidden assumption. My view is the whole picture. It feels safe, but it quietly kills curiosity. Then he hears the story of the 6 blind men and the elephant. Each man touches a different part of the animal and describes it with total confidence. It's like a wall. No, it's a spear. You're both wrong. It's a snake. You're all crazy. It's a tree. All of them are honest. None of them are lying. And yet, they all end up arguing as if the others are stupid. Something clicks. They're not wrong. They're incomplete. Each man has a slice of reality and thinks it's the whole pizza. It's the same thing that happens when someone's personal experience becomes universal law. I invested in X and it worked, so everyone should. My relationship was like this, so love is always like that. The problem isn't their sincerity, it's the missing humility. He remembers times when he was absolutely sure about something, until life humbled him. That job he thought was the worst thing ever taught him skills he uses now. That breakup he labeled a disaster protected him from a future he couldn't see. At the time, he was touching one part of the elephant. With distance, he saw more of the animal. Modern life amplifies the blind men's argument. Social media feeds him people who think like he does. So his part of the elephant starts looking like the only elephant. Algorithms create digital temples where everyone worships the same opinion. When someone from the other side appears, it feels like an invader, not a teacher. His world shrinks while his certainty grows. He tries a small but powerful experiment. The next time he feels triggered by someone's opinion, he pauses and asks, what part of the elephant might they be touching that I don't see? Maybe they grew up in a different country, had different parents, survived different struggles. Their story shaped their lens. That doesn't make them automatically right, but it makes their perception understandable. This doesn't mean all views are equally wise or harmless. Some parts of the elephant are clearly closer to reality and kindness than others. But even when he must stand firmly against something, he can do it without needing to pretend the other person is pure evil. It's one thing to say, you're wrong. It's another thing to say, you're trash. One targets the idea, the other attacks the person. He realizes that perspective is like camera angles. A building can look tall, small, wide, or narrow depending on where you stand. If 2 photographers argue, it's clearly tall versus it's clearly short, they might both be arguing from true photos. The solution isn't to delete one picture, it's to step back and see how the angles fit together. In practical terms, he tries listening differently. Instead of waiting for a pause to respond, he listens for the life experience behind the words. When someone says, money is everything, maybe they grew up poor. When someone says, you can't trust anyone, maybe they've been deeply betrayed. He doesn't have to agree to understand. And once he understands, his response becomes wiser, less reactive. A useful question appears, what am I not seeing? He applies this to himself, too. When he's stuck in a problem, he asks, If someone I respect looked at this, what angle might they see that I'm missing? Sometimes he literally asks a friend, sometimes he imagines the answer. Either way, the question itself breaks the illusion that his current view is final truth. He also notices how much peace comes from saying 4 simple words. I might be wrong. Not in a self-hating way, but in a grounded, relaxed way. It opens a window. It lets air into a room that was suffocating with certainty. Strangely, people trust him more when they see he's willing to adjust. Confidence plus humility feels stronger than rigid arrogance. At the same time, he understands that accepting partial truths doesn't mean abandoning convictions. The king in the story doesn't say, everyone is equally right, let's go home. He says, each of you has touched something real, but not the whole. In real life, that might look like, I still disagree with you, but I can see why you see it that way. He tries applying this to conflict in his relationships. Instead of, you're overreacting, he experiments with, help me see what you're feeling that I'm not perceiving. Often, there's a piece of the elephant, an old wound, an insecurity, a fear that he was completely blind to. Seeing it doesn't mean he's always wrong. It just means the argument shifts from winning to understanding. A powerful shift happens when he realizes that his own perspective today is not even the final version of his own truth. Who he'll be in 5 years will probably disagree with some of his current beliefs. That means right now, he's one of the blind men too, touching a part of his own evolving life. This makes him a little softer with himself. To train this, he chooses one topic where he feels very sure. Money, faith, success, love, and deliberately seeks out thoughtful people who see it differently. Not to convert them, but to widen his map. He doesn't swallow everything they say, but he lets their words stretch his mind. It's like adding new light sources around the elephant. The shape becomes clearer. The more he practices this, the less lonely he feels in a divided world. He sees that behind most arguments are humans bumping into each other in the dark, scared, proud, wounded, each convinced they've got the whole animal. When he remembers that, compassion becomes easier. He stops needing everyone to match his view to feel safe. Still, even as he learns to respect different angles, a deeper question emerges. If all perspectives are partial, what holds them together? What's the space in which all these views appear? That's when another story comes, about a simple bowl, the power of emptiness, and how being less full of himself might be the key to holding more of life than he ever imagined. He starts to realize how crowded his inner world has become. Thoughts, opinions, worries, plans, comparisons, noise. It's like living in a room where every surface is covered with stuff. There's barely any space left to breathe, let alone to receive something new. And strangely, the more full he feels mentally, the more empty he feels inside. It's a weird paradox, a head overflowing and a heart starving. He lives in a time that worships more productivity, more content, more followers, more improvements. Even spirituality gets turned into a performance sometimes. Meditations have to be perfect. Journaling has to be deep. Healing has to be aesthetic. Without noticing, he starts treating his inner life like a social media feed that always needs upgrading and polishing. That's why the story of the potter hits him so deeply. A man who spent his whole life making beautiful things suddenly feels none of them are good enough to offer as a gift. So he works harder, pushes further, complicates everything. He's not just shaping clay, he's secretly trying to prove something about his own worth. Sound familiar? In the story, After weeks of exhausting effort, the potter breaks. Sitting among perfect bowls that still feel wrong, he gives up trying to impress. His hands pick up a plain lump of clay almost out of boredom. And for the first time in a long time, he shapes without a plan. No design, no strategy, just presence. What emerges is a simple, honest bowl. When the Buddha arrives, he walks past the expensive offerings, the jewels, the silks, the glamorous objects, and stops at that plain bowl. He lifts it up and says something that flips the whole scene. A bowl is useful because of its emptiness. It matters less what it looks like, and more what it can hold. The space inside is the true gift. That line sticks with him. Useful because of its emptiness. It makes him look at his own life differently. Maybe his problem isn't that he doesn't have enough. Maybe it's that he doesn't have enough space. His schedule is full. His notifications are full. His mind is full. But how much room is there for silence, for insight, for genuine connection? He starts noticing how quickly he fills the bowl of every moment. Someone talks, and before they finish, his mind is already crafting a reply. A quiet bus ride becomes an automatic scroll session. Even a short break at work turns into checking emails he already checked 10 minutes ago. It's like he's allergic to empty space. So he experiments with tiny doses of emptiness. On one walk, he leaves his headphones at home and just listens to the city breathing. One meal, he eats without a screen, actually tasting the food. Before replying in a heated conversation, he takes one slow breath and lets 3 seconds of silence exist. They're small moments, but they feel strangely rich. He discovers that emptiness isn't a dead, cold void like he feared. It's more like a clean table before a meal. It's the pause that makes music beautiful. It's the blank page that makes writing possible. When there's a bit of inner space, awareness can move more freely. He responds instead of just reacting. He listens instead of just waiting to talk. The potter's bowl also makes him question his motives. How often is he trying to be the star object instead of the quiet container? At work, does he share ideas to help or to look smart? In relationships, does he listen to understand or to earn points? In spiritual practice, is he looking for truth or a shiny identity like the wise one, the healed one, the awakened one? He imagines 2 cups. One is plain, humble, and lets the tea be the star. The other is so decorated, oversized, and dramatic that you barely notice what's inside. Sometimes he has lived like that second cup, so focused on how he appears that people can't feel what he's trying to give. The message, the love, the wisdom get overshadowed by the performance. What if, he wonders, he became more like the simple bowl? Not dull, not less than, just quietly available. At a family dinner, instead of trying to dominate the conversation, he could be the space where others feel safe to share. At work, instead of needing credit for every idea, he could let solutions shine, even if his name isn't attached. The emptier his ego, the more room there is for something bigger to flow. To train this, he creates a small ritual. Before any important moment, sending a message, starting a project, entering a meeting, he pauses and asks, "What do I want to hold here? Calm? Clarity? Kindness? Courage?" Then he imagines himself as the bowl for that quality, not the main character of the scene. It's a quiet shift, but it changes how he shows up. He notices that when he's less full of himself, he's actually less anxious. There's less to defend, less to prove, less to protect. Criticism still stings, but it doesn't shatter him. Praise feels good, but it doesn't own him. He becomes a bit more like that simple bowl. Steady, available, useful, not obsessed with being admired. Gradually, he realizes something beautiful. The whole journey he's been on, the burning house, the bamboo in the storm, the ox in the meadow, the mirror lake, the honey, the king, the tree, the merchant, the beggar, the elephant, the bowl, has been pointing to the same discovery. Peace was never about adding more layers. It was about uncovering what's been quietly here all along, waiting for space to be seen. And yet, there's still a question lingering in his chest. One last thread this whole tapestry is holding. If all this wisdom is already inside, how does someone actually begin? Today, tonight, right now, to live from that place in a world that constantly pulls them away? That final question is where the real conversation with the viewer begins, long before any "once upon a time." And it's the doorway to everything the full journey promises to awaken. He used to be proud of being the peaceful one, the one who never shouted, never pushed back, never said no. People even praised him for it. "You're so calm, so patient, such a good soul." But behind that calm mask, something else was happening. Resentment. His body was tired, his heart was bruised, and his silence was starting to feel less like wisdom and more like self-betrayal. That's why the story of the cobra hits so hard. A serpent who vowed never to harm any living being. No biting, no attacking, no violence. At first, the valley respected him. Animals felt safe around him. The forest almost seemed to relax wherever he moved. But the moment some children realized he would never strike back, things changed. Respect turned into abuse. The kids began small, teasing, poking, throwing little stones. When nothing happened, they grew bolder. Bigger rocks, harsher cruelty, daily torment. The cobra kept repeating to himself, "I must not harm, I must not harm," while his body weakened and his spirit dimmed. He was holding on to his vow, but he was slowly poisoning his own life in the process. One day, beaten and exhausted, he finally breaks down when the Buddha appears and asks what happened. The cobra explains everything, ashamed and confused. He did what he thought was right, never harming anyone, and yet it only brought more suffering, not less. His question is the same many kind people secretly carry. If I don't fight back, why do I keep getting hurt? The Buddha's answer is simple and sharp. I told you not to bite. I never told you not to hiss. Non-violence and non-resistance are not the same thing. The cobra was allowed to show his power without using it. He was allowed to say, "Enough," to stand tall, to let others know, "I could hurt you, but I choose not to." That's not cruelty. That's clarity. This story exposes a painful confusion a lot of gentle souls have. They think being spiritual means being a doormat. They confuse compassion with self-erasure. They tolerate disrespect, manipulation, and even abuse, afraid that setting boundaries makes them selfish or unloving. Deep down, they're scared that if they say no, they'll stop being the good person everyone expects. He starts to see his own life in the cobra's scales. The boss who constantly asks for just one more thing, and he always says yes. The friend who only calls when they need something. The family member who crosses every limit, then plays the victim when confronted. Each time he stays silent, he tells himself, "I'm being patient." But inside, bitterness builds like venom. So what would hissing without biting look like in real life? It might be saying, "I care about you, but I won't let you speak to me that way. Or, I can't do that today. I'm at my limit. Or even, if this behavior continues, I'll need to step back from this relationship. No insults, no revenge, just calm, firm truth that says, I respect both of us too much to let this continue. Modern psychology backs this up. People with healthy boundaries have better mental health, more stable relationships, and less burnout. They're not the ones doing the most dramatic sacrifices. They're the ones who quietly say, this is okay, this is not. They don't wait until the anger explodes. They adjust the situation while their heart is still soft. He tries a small experiment. Instead of letting resentment pile up, he starts noticing the very first signs. Tight chest, forced smile, that little voice saying, here we go again. Right there, before the stone hits harder, he practices one honest sentence. Hey, when you do this, I feel drained. Can we do it differently? It's scary, but it feels cleaner than swallowing everything. Of course, not everyone likes the new version of him. Some people were very comfortable with the silent cobra. They roll their eyes, accuse him of changing, or call him selfish. That's another deep teaching of the story. When you finally protect yourself, those who benefited from your lack of boundaries may call your growth a problem. It doesn't mean you're wrong. To stay grounded, he creates a simple inner rule. If I wouldn't want someone I love to be treated this way, I won't accept it for myself. This keeps him from over-rationalizing disrespect. If he'd tell his best friend to walk away from that situation, why is he forcing himself to stay? Suddenly, self-respect starts to look a lot like self-compassion. He also learns that boundaries don't have to be dramatic. They can be gradual, answering messages later instead of immediately, saying, I'll think about it, instead of automatic yes, leaving a room when a conversation turns toxic, choosing silence not as submission, but as a clear, conscious withdrawal of energy from what harms him. The cobra, once he begins to hiss, doesn't stop being kind. He doesn't start attacking everyone. He simply stops allowing cruelty to go unanswered. And a strange thing happens. Respect returns. The children realize he's not weak. He's merciful. His power was always there. He just finally agreed to show a little of it. He starts to see that real peace isn't about never upsetting anyone. It's about being internally aligned. When his actions match his truth, when his yes means yes, and his no means no, he sleeps better. His body relaxes. His relationships become fewer, maybe, but they become cleaner, more mutual, less filled with quiet resentment. From here, another question starts forming in his mind. If setting boundaries is one side of wisdom, what about giving? How does he keep his heart open and generous without falling back into self-destruction? That's when a new story arrives, about a stream that tried to stop flowing, and the surprising lesson it learned about serving others without losing itself. If you've come this far, something in you is already different. Maybe it's not loud or dramatic. Maybe it's just a quieter breath, a softer thought, a tiny space between you and your worries. But that space matters. That's the place where the burning house stops controlling you, and you start choosing how to walk out of it, one conscious step at a time. From now on, every small moment can become practice. When impatience hits, remember the bamboo that bends instead of breaking. When you feel trapped in endless seeking, remember the farmer's ox that was never really lost. When emotions surge like a storm, remember the mountain pool that clears by itself if you stop stirring it. You don't have to fix your whole life in one day. You just have to notice what's happening inside. one breath at a time. Ask yourself, honestly, what honey has been poisoning you aos poucos? A habit that you defend, even though it drains you. A relationship, a screen, an approval you're addicted to. Are you ready to taste it with awareness instead of compulsion? Or maybe to step away completely, just like the deer should have walked past the poisoned sweetness. Look at how you treat yourself. Are you living like that monk who starved his own soul in the name of discipline? Or swinging to the other extreme, numbing yourself with comfort and calling it self-care? What would your middle way look like in practice this week? More sleep and less self-sabotage? More honest conversations and fewer fake smiles? And when life asks for generosity, what kind of heart do you want to have? The king who was willing to offer everything, even his own life, because he understood we're all connected. Or the fisherman who almost sold his soul for the golden fish, and only discovered real wealth when he chose compassion instead of profit. Maybe your big test won't be dramatic. Maybe it's just sharing time, attention, forgiveness, or a kind word exactly when your ego doesn't feel like it. Right now, take a look at your own wealth. Not your bank account, but your eyes, your hands, your mind, your ability to love and to start again. Have you been walking through life like that beggar, calling yourself poor while carrying treasures no one could ever buy? What would change if, every morning for 7 days, you thanked life for 3 things you would never sell for any amount of money? How would that shift your mood, your choices, your sense of who you are? And when you disagree with others, and you will you argue like the blind men, each one screaming, "I'm right," while holding only a piece of the elephant? Or will you remember that your view is real but incomplete, just like theirs? Can you hold your truth with firmness and humility at the same time, knowing that wisdom grows when different angles of reality learn to talk instead of fight? In the end, everything you heard tonight pointed to the same place: the empty bowl. The part of you that doesn't need to perform, to prove, to impress. The space in you that can hold calm in chaos, clarity in confusion, love in the middle of imperfection. That quiet, open awareness is your true home, and you can return there with a single, honest breath. So now it's your turn. What story from this journey hit you the hardest? Which practice are you willing to try this week? 3 conscious breaths, bending like bamboo, letting the water of your mind settle, tasting your honey with awareness. Tell me in the comments what you're going to change first. Make it real. Put it in words. Commit to at least one small, concrete action. And if this video touched you in any way, if it gave you peace, clarity, or just a sense of, finally, someone understands how my mind feels, don't keep this path so prévocé. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and stay close. We'll keep walking together, story by story, breath by breath, discovering that inner temple you've always carried, even on your worst days. There's a lot more waiting for you on this path, and this is just the beginning.